Today it's a bit of a milder day, not as cold as the last few days. How's everyone doing? Good to have you on board, and it's good to see people coming in to be part of our session this morning. My name is Lebule Tswalo. I am the supply chain coach, and today we have a very exciting discussion in terms of unethical supply chain practices, specifically on procurement. Before I even go into that, guys, I just want to ask some few things, colleagues. May you please ensure that your videos are stopped, you have muted as well your audios. Along the way, you'll get a chance to also liaise with ourselves if we have enough time throughout the process. Another thing that I will request is that this is going to be a very engaging discussion. So please, if you have questions that need to be shared with the panel speakers, please make sure that those questions are put on the chat box. I would really appreciate that, because we want your input. If you're a professional out there, you are a service provider out there, definitely looking forward to engaging with you and coming up with the best solution for our industry. Welcome again to our session for those that keep on joining us. So what is this day all about? It's about discussing unethical procurement practices. I think we know what has been happening in the industry. There's a lot that we need to unpack in terms of really saving our profession. Today I am joined by esteemed speakers in the industry. You would have seen that when we were advertising this, what we said was, this is industry's response in terms of the report and ensuring that our profession is protected. And that is what we are discussing this morning. We will want to make sure that by the time we finish off with our session this morning, we've got the best solutions that can be recommended further to ensure that us as an industry, as industry professionals, industry bodies as well, we come up with the solution. So without really spending much time on this, we are joined by people that are on LinkedIn, Facebook as well. A special welcome to yourself. I cannot see your faces, I cannot see your names, but I recognize you also yourself. If you have some questions, please put them on the chat box. Welcome. Tell me where you are coming from. Share with us your experiences around unethical procurement practices. If you are a service provider out there, I just want to ask you a question. Have you been or found yourself in a situation whereby you have been asked to pay a bribe? And from the procurement perspective, or from an engineer in an organization, have you ever found yourself being asked, please pay for a holiday, pay for for the flights to some place, please pay the school fees, please pay the house, then I will be able to give you a contract? Have you found yourself being paying some money out there, and dollar law, you don't even get a contract? That's exactly what is happening. Have you found yourself as a professional out there, as a practitioner, that you had reported on unethical procurement practices, and you found your profession being jeopardized? You found yourself being moved from a profession. I want to really hear your stories, and how have you handled such situations? Or if you know anyone out there who is the person that has been marginalized as a procurement professional because of that, please share your story. I really want to hear what is happening. And we will also share with you how you can report such things. You need to be protected. I am a supply chain practitioner, and I want to make sure that our profession is seen, is recognized as well. So with that, I would just really want to give you a state of procurement with respect to corruption in the industry. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in terms of my presentation, but it's just to really bring the context in terms of what has been happening for the past few years and why we are here having a discussion. So a couple of years ago, in 2020, our WISCA, our organization, our nonprofit organization, conducted an anti-corruption perception survey from the practitioners. We also launched a petition on the change.org combating corruption in the country, and we have had a lot of signatories to that petition. That petition is still open. And what has happened was that subsequent to that, we had our first webinar on ethical practices. So today's session is in fact a continuation of what we had discussed previously. So a couple of recommendations from the report were shared, and they were as follows. I mean, I'm talking about three things that has happened before the Zondo report was made public, which was this year. And a couple of things came up that we need to look at consequence management in terms of the industry. We need to regulate the supply chain profession and create a code of ethics for licensed practitioners. And it was also requested we need to start elevating the procurement profession to an extent that we start looking at the formal education at the universities as well as in organizations. But also what has happened is that, just to give you the context, is that if you look at professionalization of supply chain, in order of priority. So out of all the respondents, one of the things that the supply chain professional says that we should commence with starting with regulating procurement, then a license to practice must follow immediately. And then thirdly, we need to institute a fitness test for supply chain roles. And this needs to be introduced. And ultimately, we need to start pledging. And I always say that when you're talking to pledging, then it also speaks to an organization also that has got a culture of really pushing towards ethical practices in the industry. This is not what I said, by the way. These are the procurement practitioners that were part of this survey that we read. And with regards to the question that we asked on the regulatory framework, 51% suggested that the supply chain profession should introduce an anti-corruption policy. And then the 49% just said that they will want to actively report on corruption activities. So introducing anti-corruption policies, they believe that it will be more effective than just reporting on such corruption activities. What are your thoughts around that? I would really want to hear what you are saying. With regards to reporting, a lot of the professionals says that 86% of participants indicated that they will report on corruption, and 14% they said, no, we will not report on any corruption. Because in reality, whistleblowers are not protected. So even those that says, yes, we will want to report, but they are still saying that we need protection of whistleblowers. Going forward, with regards to an element that speaks to reporting, they're still saying that 81% still saying that they are not feeling secure, even if they want to report, and they need to be protected when they report on corruption, because I think we have seen some stories out there where people said, I reported on corruption. However, what has happened in my life that information came out that I have reported on corruption. So you see, we need to have that comfort that if you want to really build this corruption, something needs to be done. Now, let's look at it. From late last year, this year, with the Zondo report, there's been a lot of headlines that are coming up. I think most of you are aware of it, and I think a lot of people are just so tired talking about corruption. But the truth is, we want to make sure that the supply chain profession is protected. We have seen that the state capture. You have seen an element that speaks to corruption. We have seen that it has drastically increased. We have seen the president receiving a report from the Zondo report that has gone out based on the investigations that has been happening, the commission of inquiry in terms of state capture. There's part one, but there's also part two as well. We are saying now, let us stop corruption. And we are saying that we know there's a lot of recommendations that has gone out there, but looking at those recommendations, what is it that we should be having? I'm going to unpack this recommendation for you. And I'm just trying to give you a trail so that you understand where we started 2020 already started. We already seen what the challenges were that were facing the procurement profession. So now I want to unpack these recommendations, and I want you all to understand that today's discussion is not about the cases themselves in full, because there's recommendations that are affecting procurement that we need to take forward. And that is what the discussion is all about. It's already around how do we ensure that the recommendations that are coming from the Zondo report are being taken forward. It's just not another discussion that happens. From 2020 and a couple of other years, we have been discussing an element of corruption and how do we ensure that we protect the industry. So summing this up, it was requested in terms of the recommendation that we look at the publication of a national charter against corruption, which will include a code of conduct and look at ethical standards. The creation of an anti-corruption agency dealing with public procurement. And then the strengthening of protection for whistleblowers and allowing them to financially benefit from their disclosures as well. So you report, then you have to be compensated. The deferral of prosecution of corporations if they cooperate fully and pay a fine. That does not necessarily teach us, put us in that element, because we want more procurement. The creation of a professional body for procurement officers. Yes, we know ourselves that as procurement professionals, we do not report in a certain statutory body, unfortunately. So there is a need to start looking at that. And that we need to look at the enhancement of transparency in public procurement in terms of procurement out there. Everything needs to be transparent. If you look at public procurement, you look at PFMA, what is the requirement around that? The enhancement of transparency, strengthening of protection for accounting offices, the strengthening of prevention of combating of corrupt activities, and criminalizing of making donations to political parties in exchange for a tender. And then the introduction of a stronger and more specific legislation relating to public procurement, including centralization and better training for public procurement officials. So the question is, have you seen these recommendations, colleagues? Because this touches on our profession. Every time I talk about this, this recommendation, I have to really flag this. This is not just about public procurement. Private procurement as well has got some element of corruption around and ethical practices as well. But how do we ensure that in totality, we protect our profession? The last thing that I want to share is the Corruption Perception Index, which normally comes out on a yearly basis. So what it shows, it ranks 180 countries and territories around the world by their perceived level of public sector corruption. So as you can see that the results are given on a scale of 0 up to 100. The cleanest country, so that it makes it easy, on the yellow side is Denmark, and the worst is South Sudan. South Africa is number 44 out of all the countries. So that is our ranking in terms of the Corruption Perception Index. This is a perception of levels, levels of public sector corruption, and this was contributed by the PPE scandal during COVID and so forth, and the interviews that were done also with the professions as well out there. So the question now and the discussion that we are having is, what next? We have a good panel today that will share with us all of these things that are coming. We always knew about them before these general recommendations that came forward. Professionalization, where are we? What should we be doing? Because we've been talking about this for years. I know all of you as professionals out there are definitely looking to hear that, am I protected? What are you guys doing as the industry captains? Ethical considerations, what are the things that are happening in the industry? Academic considerations. We go through a lot of training. We have the masters, we have the doctorates in supply chain management, but are we focusing on the right things? That's what we will be discussing this morning. Regulatory support, what do we require from the government to be able to do to ensure that we eliminate corruption? Culture, the culture of yourself as a person and the culture of companies as well. Consequence management, when you do wrong, why are we not practicing consequence management? And then what recommendations should we be taking forward that we can propose on our side as well, because these are the industry captains, these are the associations that are representing the industry. And we also wanted to learn insights from SAICA, as you know that with the accounting bodies, being an accountant, what happens if you are involved in corruption scandals, what happens to yourself is that they call you in and they discipline you. So that's our discussion this morning. So which takes me to the next point and really discussing our agenda. What is it that we are covering this morning? And I will be introducing our panel one that we are starting with. So with that, Rose, if you can please show the agenda that we are sharing with the colleagues this morning, then I can introduce the speakers. Thank you, colleagues. So with that, I wanted to start thinking around it that if you did not know around you didn't know anything about this recommendation from the Zondo report, those are the recommendations, and those are the recommendations that are basically touching each and every portion of your life. And we want to hear what your thoughts are around that. So moving, if you look at our agenda is jam-packed. We're going to have two panels. The first panel will be led by Dr. Benny Likubo, Mr. Kamukalo Mampane, and Mr. Sean Scott. And we're going to be focusing on anti-corruption measures, the public procurement bill, looking at professionalization of our, of supply chain management, board oversight, which is very important as well, that we want to understand the role that boards normally play in this process. Look at the concept of good faith, competence, look at the case law around good faith as well. And our second panel is a panel that includes Professor Amber. Professor Amber is a deputy chairperson of the Procurement Council, and he will share with us the work that has been done by the council. Mr. Ngube, look at competencies and skills of supply chain professionals. Where are we? What should we be incorporating going forward? And Ms. Sarah Homan as well, who's going to share with us the ethics report that SIPS has been run, and also help you around professionalization and interventions that we should be adopting as an industry. So all of that, your questions and answers are accepted. Please send your notes. Tell me what is it that you want to hear around this concept. So with that, I would want to introduce Dr. Benny first. Who is he? He's an academic and anti-corruption subject matter expert. Dr. Benny, please show your face so that people can see you. Whilst I introduce you, thank you for joining us. He's an expert on anything that speaks to anti-corruption and issues, forensics as well. He has been featured on national and local radio and television stations on issues that speaks to corruption, and is an ideal person because he has been immensely contributing to that and fighting against corruption in the country as well. You will see that he has represented a panelist of African Capital Cities Sustainability Forum on Finance and Governance for Sustainable Cities as well. Some of the work that he has done is writing a paper that speaks on anti-corruption and education reimagined post-COVID-19 in African universities. So there's a lot that you will know. He serves on various audit and risk committee meetings as well, on talent advisory board, RTNC, and so forth. So colleagues, a special welcome to Dr. Benny. Dr. Benny, let's have a discussion around this. I mean, we have a very, very important subject that we are talking about right now. And it's really around ethical practices. You spent your time in the industry, a couple of years already, you've contributed, I've listened to you on radio. What's your experience around this discussion? I mean, there's a lot of anti-corruption measures. I want to know your view around that ethics. How does it play a part in this environment? And also touching a bit on the public procurement bill.
Colleagues, thank you so much. Am I audible enough at this point in time?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let me take this opportunity and welcome everybody and say to you and to the panels and to the listeners as well that we are now engaging into discussions that are burning. These are discussions that we are aware that are topical issues that the country is actually busy battling with at this point in time. You may have seen in a number of occasions. Firstly, let me touch on issues that are related to where all this started. You'd remember corruption, it's an issue, it's a bane, it's an insidious disease that really pains any institution that you will find. So it's a worry that at this point in time, the language that we speak in South Africa, we are speaking corruption, we are speaking anti-corruption, we are speaking unethical behavior. And what we want to see, it's a level at which the people that we are going to employ, the officers that we want to put in the office to say, these are the people that have ethical conduct, their ethics and their level of engagement into wanting to ensure that this country is going to perform better. And I'm happy that you raised the issue with regards to the perception of what the country is looking at. If we are going to ensure that the country moves forward in sorting out its issues, the country is going to perform better in terms of the perception index. We need to look into ourselves as individuals, as companies, as people that are sitting in boards, as people that are working on procurement. What is it that you want to contribute to this country that is going to better this country? And this is a responsibility of each and every one of us as South African citizens, as individuals, as business people, as business companies, as academics, as researchers. This is our utmost importance. Now, what is corruption? Let's maybe touch a bit of base on that. Corruption is the abuse of power. That's number one that we need to understand. It's the abuse of power for personal gain. You find somebody that gets into an office, engages into unethical behavior with a procurement officer, and that's where the level of corruption will start, which must be distinguished as well versus what fraud is. Because when you discuss issues related to fraud, you then say, what is fraud? Fraud, it's more a behavior where there is trickery, where there is misrepresentation of information, and we need to make sure that we get that distinction. Now, of paramount importance, you would notice that already somewhere in 2011, when the former head of the SIU, Mr. Veli Hofmeyer, when he reported to the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Development, at that point in time, there was about 588 procurement contracts, which were valued at about 9.1 billion rands, and about 360 cases of conflict of interest at a value of 3.5 billion rands. Now, you ask yourself, if we have issues that are related to PPE contracts and ethical behavior, what is it that we needed to do at that point in time to alleviate or to avert or to ameliorate a situation that we could have averted when we got into the current pandemic issues? One, we have an issue that is related to the PPE corruption scandal. And I think all of us that are sitting here are vastly aware that there is so much money that the SIU has been investigating. And a point in reference, it's the SIU has been investigating about 13.3 billion rands of PPE contracts, which for me, and I think this we could have dealt with at that point in time when we started with the investigation with the SIU in 2011, to say, what are the issues? How do we prepare for an eventuality like this? How do we then bring ethics into place? How do we bring individuals into place that are going to be working on these things and ensuring that there are no issues that will come at a later stage? Now, let's talk about the issues that are related to ethics. What do we mean but about ethics? Ethics, it's the core of any organization. If you don't have any ethical procedures, or you have people that are going to understand what ethics is, these are going to be the challenges. And my sense as an individual would be that let us have a situation where our people are going to be adequately trained. We need people that are going to have one, they have to be certified ethics individuals, and we need that. We need to ensure, and those discussions, I suppose, they will unfold as time goes on. It is important that we ensure that our procurement officers, and these are discussions that I've been having with colleagues as well. How do you then have individuals that you put in one corner and say, we can't rotate these people? Why don't you move these people from one angle to another in order to ensure that the same persons don't deal with the same issues time and over and over and again? And maybe let me rest on that issue and touch on a bit again on issues that are related to anti-corruption. Now, when we speak about anti-corruption and the anti-corruption strategies and structures and all that, you would understand that yes, there are institutions of anti-corruption. You look at your SIUs, and I'm pleased and I'm honored to even put it on record that as a country we must applaud the SIU for the work that they have been doing in terms of dealing with corruption with no fear or favor. And I think that is very important, that we need to know that it is without fear and favor. We have the Public Protector Office, who has just released a report and with a very clean audit. Look at the cases that the Public Protector has dealt with. Very clean, very good results that have been coming out of those cases. And that is what we want to see. You look at the SAPS, the DPCI. They've also been investigating issues that are related to corruption, and these are institutions that will require people that know and understand what is required in terms of dealing with anti-corruption in this institution. However, now if you have to think about anti-corruption, dealing with anti-corruption from a criminal justice point of view, you have your judiciaries, you have your NPA, which is a very serious concern for me as well, because if at this point in time, we've been dealing with the state capture for a period of about 4 years, 5 years now, and at this point in time, one of the challenges that we have as the NPA is the fact that, one, we need adequate people that are skilled, that know how to prosecute corruption. And that's a challenge. And this was also deliberated by the DPP, Shamila Bitoy, who acknowledged that they do not have the required skills and human resources to deal with these. And that's why you'd find out the discussions that are going on at this point in time are more related to private prosecution. And this is where the country wants to go. But these are issues that we can then look at a later stage. Briefly so, how many minutes do I have, Madam Chair?
You still have time, but I just want to tap onto something, because you've been raising a lot of very important issues here. I think the first part, and that I want to tap on, and you just explained it quite well, that corruption is really around the misuse of entrusted power, because you're using your power for private gain. That's already what you've already said. And one of the things that you brought forward is an issue of governance, and you put in a lot of emphasis in terms of the board as well. Because there's entrusted individuals in organization. Boards have got a role in terms of oversight, financial growth, look at the revenue of organizations as well, and managing the risks of the business. And I really want to touch, do you think, and I want to also bring Kamogelo on this as just a pointer for him to just add up, because I want this to be very, just to get different perspectives around that. Is there any abuse of power according to you? I mean, we've seen the part 1 and part 2 of the report, and I've always listened to people saying that it starts at the top, but you always have got executives. You also have operational people at the same time. So let's talk about this abuse of power. And whilst I'm commenting on this, I also want to bring Kamogelo. Kamogelo, if you can also show your face, I want us to have a discussion between the two of us. So let me quickly just introduce Kamogelo, colleagues. Kamogelo is he is a CEO and functioning as an executive chairman at the at SAPIX, at the Supply Chain Council, but also he's also a SAPIX board member, very instrumental in procurement, in supply chain management, whereby he contributes on various areas of strategic sourcing, supplier relationship management. I think for most of us that knows Kamogelo, we know how he has contributed to a lot of policies and frameworks out there in the industry. So Kamogelo, I want to bring this element, and thanks for joining us. Looks like you are in a soccer stadium. Where are you at? Where does it really rot? And I want to get Kamogelo's view, and Dr. Likubu, then you can just tap onto that. Let's talk about this board governance as to where does it really start, because you've got a role within different organizations.
No, absolutely. Ndareluku, one of my previous boss is a Meluku, right? A CFO from the mining sector. I need to talk to you. Maybe you know each other. Meletswalo, thanks first of all for inviting us to be with you. For me, that picture is also very important because what we are discussing today as well is driven by behavior. It's driven by people. Yes, you are absolutely right, Melitswalo, that governance is extremely important. In any organization, as Ndatilukubu had said, generally, one of the lines, the first lines of defense is management, right? So meaning governance. Okay, sorry, I see people are saying they are struggling a bit to hear me.
Okay, for those, we can hear you clearly, Kamogelo. For those that can't hear us clearly, please just send through a note. Sipo, we can see you have a challenge on your side. We can hear the panelists quite well. So, Kamogelo, you may proceed. Yes.
Because he must hear me as well. Yes, yes. So really, it's about people, Meletswalo. So we definitely have to invest. We can put policies, and policies are important, extremely important, because when you join an organization, you must know the rules of the game. So policies, that's all what they do. They give you the rules of the game. But you are right, Melitswalo, it's all about people. And the latter question about what do we have in this country in policy, and Adilukubu has explained very high level policy directives that we have in terms of our laws, but bringing it at home closer to supply chain. We have to look at the public procurement bill, Melitswalo. Is it laying that particular foundation? Oh, sorry, I see Melitswalo is.
I want us to park it there because I wanted to touch on the board issue specifically in terms of their oversight, also because everyone is saying that the Republic of South African Parliament is the board of our country, but also I would take it to the private companies, and we will get onto the other discussion immediately with the bill and so forth. I want us to touch on that immediately afterwards.
Yes.
But I think what's very important for the purpose of this is just really saying, how do we ensure that the board does not interfere with procurement processes? I think for me, that's the most important part. Yes.
So the reason why I'm referring to the public procurement bill is that we need to look at, does the public procurement bill protect the officials, but also creates the segregation of duties? Because Melitswalo, if you do not have a legislative framework for that, then you can implement it. And especially those that are in public sector, you know yourself that in public sector, it's all about rules and rules and rules. So are our public officials, do they have a legal instrument that they can use, that they can say, sorry, Mr. Board, unfortunately, I cannot do certain things because of this tool that I have in my pocket. And that's why I'm referring to it, because unfortunately, that's the only thing they will have. So the board appointment, we have, and it is very important, Melitswalo, that whatever we discussing needs to be discussed within the laws of our country. And if those things are not protecting the public procurement officials, unfortunately, they are left on their own. We fully understand that the work of the board is oversight, right? We have always been saying that if you are the referee, you cannot be the player. It's a very simple principle of segregation of duties. But unfortunately, many boards, and especially in state-owned companies, they started saying that, look, we want to be part of the operations. We cannot just play an oversight role, but we also want to be part of the operations. And that should never have been allowed. And even though Melitswalo, I'll make an example. Um, we when a minister, you had a minister being interviewed and saying, I have a purchase order with me and I'm looking at this. Many people were saying, yeah, of course you must do that. Look at that. And then because we're not happy with the appointments that were done. So we had a minister who was taking a contract, a certain contract with purchase order, reviewing it, having a panel of people helping him to look at the purchase order. Melitswalo, something wrong has happened in that process. The work of the board must be oversight. Once you say the board must approve transactions, then what we have seen in the past with the Zondo Commission is just going to be a 5-second movie, unfortunately. Many people now are saying, look, we love the boards that are there. We love the people that are there. Now, the people that are there are now going again, doing what their predecessors did by going again into those purchase orders, saying, we want to be the approvers of this. And we are saying we are happy because we are happy with individuals. And once we change the policy directives, the legislative tools that we have, because we like the people that are in the house, one day the people in the house will move, and certain people that do not like a move, and then we're going to have to want to change the rules. So for me, it is extremely important that even the public procurement bill, as it is at the moment, needs to reflect on that and put a very strong measure, because currently, if you read the public procurement bill, it sounds as if, and I'm not saying this is the intention, but it reads as if that there must be a confirmation of transactions by the accounting officer. So we use words loosely. Who is an accounting officer in a state-owned company? Then we are saying the board must take over, right? And that's why you have a problem now between the executive, which is really the people that are mandated to deal with operation, and not the board. So once again, just in summary, just answering your question, we need a public procurement bill to protect the public officials. If you look at section 17 and 18 that talks about the disclosure and all of those things, the board, the MEC, the DGs will still, or at least a DG you can understand, but at the ministerial, not at the ministerial level. So for state-owned companies and even in private sector, you cannot, the board, at least in private sector, say, look, we don't want to see purchase orders. We don't want to see contracts, right? But unfortunately, instead on companies, they say, no. They even change policies. And you know, those big, I'm not going to mention names. Some of our biggest SOEs have even changed their policies to empower board members to be the approver of a transaction. And as a profession, and we need to be very, very worried. Once again, I'll end by saying the Zondo Commission will be a 5-second movie, but we are going to be hit by something big in the future.
Definitely agree with you, Kamkhele. Board has got a specific role and they should not be included on operational matters. Let's go back to Dr. Likubu. I want us to continue with that conversation around anti-corruption issue. You've indicated the work that has been done out there by the SIU, DPP, and also the challenge of the skills and resources that are supposed to be helping us alleviate this corruption. May you please just proceed with that? Thank you.
Okay, Chair, allow me just to touch a second or two on what Ntate Kamohelo just said. And I think it's important that we note it as well, because one of the challenges that we have in boards and trying to have an oversight, it's your political appointments. And I think it's a serious worry where you're going to appoint people politically, but those people don't even have the skills or the knowledge of that particular area. And that is a serious issue that we have in this country, where we only appoint people in boards because of their political connection. I think that's an issue that we need to address at some point. Now, the second point would be that an oversight that is paramount. And I think in coming up and listening to the Zondo Commission and the deliberations and the evidence that was presented, you have your audit committees that are sitting there, right? And these are the same people that have been compromised, whereas we had expected them to be able to have an oversight over the boards, over management, and over operations, right? And these are the issues that I think are important, that we need to start correcting from the head. And somebody on the chat was saying a fish starts rotting from the top. And it is important. I think once we start dealing from the top and cleaning up from there, we should be able to deal with any other institutions that are coming in. Your internal auditors, your external auditors, these are the people that we have contracted to come on board to ensure that the operations and the financial position of an institution is sound. And I just wanted to add that. But coming back to issues related to anti-corruption, you would remember that our country has got an anti-corruption policy, and this goes without saying that the worry that we have as academics, as researchers in the field, is that South Africa is holistically has got a plethora of policies and procedures and laws that work perfectly, and many countries have copied, have looked at South Africa and say, yes, they've got a very, very beautiful constitution. They've got a very beautiful policy or act that deals with corruption. But our main problem in this country, it's the implementation thereof. We found, I mean, a situation, look at what has been happening from the Zondo Commission. We've had cases that have been presented. We have evidence that is a wow to everybody, but we are still trying to battle to see that there are cases that are being started to be prosecuted and all those kind of things. And I wish our NPAs, our prosecutors should start looking at what the law says, implement what the law says, and put aside whether this is high profile or low profile, or is the lowest person that you will find in the street. Because for me, there's a situation where you get for example, let's take a pragmatic example. Your procurement officers are the ones that are becoming sacrificial lambs, right? For political scoring, where people are scoring huge contracts. But the issue is that they get compromised because that person is being offered a 50,000 rands reward. I'm just hypothetically using 50,000 rands, and they're happy to receive it. That person has a duty to say, I'm going to give this person this contract. I'll get a reward of 10% or whatever the situation. We know these cases have been coming up where people are even afraid to do a lifestyle audit, which is important. I think that must be done. You go and look at a junior procurement officer, stays at the double-story house, drives a massive big cars, and you look at the bank account of that person and say, yeah, but there must be something wrong here. You have correctly said it, Chair, at the beginning of your deliberations. Have we, as individuals, as South Africans, at one point been compromised, right? And I want to refer back to anyone and everyone. How many of us were offered VIP tickets to go and watch a soccer game because that person wants to submit a quotation or a tender to you or whatever it is? So we need to think about all these things as individuals to say, am I doing the right thing? And that brings issues of integrity into play. What is integrity? Integrity is doing that right thing, even when nobody is watching. And Jay, I think we need to try and look at all those kind of things. Let me pause a little bit and hear other views.
You know, you're bringing a very important element where you are saying that procurement officers most of the time becomes sacrificial lambs because they are at the end of the process. One of the things when we coach entrepreneurs is really explain, you know, and also buyers or procurement practitioners understanding the end-to-end procurement process, that corruption can happen anywhere before it even gets to a procurement professional out there, because what we are doing is a specification, the budget, and you must execute. You just do not know what happened prior to that process. Listen, we're not going to say that everyone, yes, is perfect in the process. However, in most instances, understanding the end-to-end procurement process, you must always know that procurement are at the end of the tunnel, and the delegation that is given to a procurement professional is really saying that whatever you issue out into the, you know, to the market, you need to make sure that you understand the processes, what is there, because you are fully accountable for that. If you're a CFO, what is it, a CPO, a supply chain manager, you are accountable for any mess that happens, you know, within that process, even if the mess was created prior to that process. So it's very important for yourself as a procurement practitioner, understand the triggers, what to do and what to not accept. And you also brought the issue of the lifestyle audits and being given that 50,000. I know that, and we've had this discussion on our previous conversation around the salary scales of the procurement professionals. So we always say that procurement is a lever for economic growth. In any organization, any entrepreneurs that we believe that they'll be the ones that's lifting the country going forward, they have to go through this procurement process as well. So what happens in that, you know, someone said that imagine just getting, I remember last year's comment that imagine just getting 400,000 annually. And then you have to issue out a contract for like 2 billion, you know, to a person. And you start looking at your salary and asking, what am I doing wrong? And someone, you know, commented on that the truth is if you are also not rewarded properly, and we'll touch on that, I think, later. I know that SIPS normally conducts a salary survey in the industry, so it would be good to hear from Sari, anything like that, if we think that probably it may be contributing. But ultimately, we are talking about ethics, we're talking about the governance as well, and doing things right. I would want now to tap back onto Kamakhala, Dr. Lekubu. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you want to add. So I want to unpack, some of the pointers that you've spoken of, just moving directly onto Kamakhala and Mr. Sean Scott on the issue of skills. I mean, you raised the issue of skills from the procurement perspective and say we need to have trained professionals. So I want to take it now forward now to Kamokhelo and also to Sean afterwards in terms of the training that is available, and also from the SAPICS as well, the professional body, and your experience as well, Kamokhelo, around that. I want us now to that process now from your side. So that Dr. Lukubu, I will call you in again where I need your additional contribute. Thank you so much for adding your input on this. We will revert back again to yourself. I know that there will be other matters that you want to add. So, but I want to add, some more with Kamokhelo. Let's talk about professionalization, Kamokhelo, and the skills.
Yeah, no, thanks. So as we've discussed, yes, there are important things to deal with fraud, and obviously, I think that will analyze the problem very, very well, because to get to solutions, of course, we need to understand the root causes of this, and clearly, one of the biggest problems is at the governance side. Now, where procurement, it's not regarded as an important function in the organization, and it's left downstream to the third or to the fourth level of reporting from ESCO, then we generally see high level of non-compliance, high levels of fraudulent activities, and high levels of corruption. And in the main, that is seen by people that drives procurement in those organizations. So the most important thing, because generally the board will invest in areas where they see value, right? If they do not see value, procurement people struggle to push themselves to that boardroom and to have a seat, let alone to have a seat, but just to have an ear to the CEO to discuss their challenges. So, however, where supply chain has been used, because many organizations, and especially during COVID, they started looking at where can they trim the fat, but make sure that that function that lays that golden egg, it's supported and it lays more golden eggs. Investments were put in that, and many organizations realize that if you do not invest in supply chain, even in the current situation where the whole world is struggling to get products into their countries, to get products to their to consumers, the blockages are in supply chain, right? So that has elevated supply chain, and we really encourage that supply chain professionals. This is a problem that should never go to waste, because that's where supply chain people should have come with solutions before even the CEO realized that there's a problem. Because once we realize that there's going to be blockages, we are standing with 14 up to 21 days of blockages in our harbors to get throughput. Supply chain people should have been upfront to say, boards and ESCOs, we have a problem, and here's a solution to that. Then the board will have seen the value of supply chain and the ESCO as well. But we have seen, especially, for example, in big organizations in the country, our logistics companies in the country. We're not going to mention them by name. Supply chain organization, those are doing warehousing, those are doing freight forwarding and all of that. They are actually taking the lead in creating innovative ideas of how they can leverage, how they can create more golden eggs for their institutions. So it is indeed a fact that supply chain professionals, where they cannot get investment outside their functions, they need to empower themselves. So whilst we have very limited budget within supply chains to empower, to develop, and to create innovative solutions, unfortunately, we have to use whatever reins that we have if we can attract investment. But fortunately, in this country, using the words Ntate Lukubu, we have enough professionalization organizations or organizations that are supporting supply chain professionalization. And if you are a supply chain professional and you are not linked to any of those professional bodies, because they create a platform to learn from each other. We learn from how other supply chain professionals are dealing with the current value chain challenges, how they are innovating, how they're creating new solutions, either to old problems or to new problems, sometimes to even future problems. If you are not part of that collective and also contributing to that as well, unfortunately, we are getting into a situation where we have very limited resources, limited budget. I mean, if you look at the South African government, how much have they been trying to trim? And unfortunately, that has impacted supply chain a lot. It has impacted generally skills development, the monies that have been put on skills development. So these platforms, really paying your membership, having access to this wealth of information that you can use within your own organizations. For me, that is extremely important. Belong to a club of professionals, whether it's on a WhatsApp group, it's on YouTube, it's on LinkedIn, and at least let's build ourselves. I'll make a simple example. Today, we shouldn't be talking about bids that are still being administered manually. So you wonder why, some organizations still insist on a paper process when it is not that expensive anymore, maybe in the past, right? Because many people have invested in this big, huge system that needs an independent server. It cannot run on a cloud. It needs its own server. It must be in-house. We must see this thing. And it must be managed by warm bodies. I mean, those days are past, are gone, but we still have the same problem where I mean, today you probably can subscribe on a system that runs in a full automated bidding process for less than 10,000 rands per month, right? There's no longer a need of investing millions and millions of rand. And this thing is run on a cloud. It runs your bidding process. It runs your strategic sourcing process. It even preempts how the adjudication process should be. It's auditable, it's transparent. But hey, are we seeing investments? Are we seeing a lot of supply chain organization taking up these innovative processes? Is not that expensive in the past, like it was in the past. That it's because people want to still see paper, because with the paper I can make it disappear, right? Like I can disappear, right? Or I can make it appear again. And when I make it appear again, probably the numbers are not what they were before, right? So that problem still exists, Meletswalo. But because organizations and the head of supply chain have taken a lead and said, and we have that, and maybe in other sessions, Meletswalo, we can show examples. I mean, I'll make an example. I'll mention a name just so that people can go to them. You can go to Petro SA, right? A very vanilla type of a system, right? The head of supply chain at Petro SA has not seen a paper uh, tender for more than 10 years, more than 10 years, right? And that system is not even heavy. And it's not even about the system because it's all about leadership, right? Even though there are certain things that are happening in the background, but for him, anything that comes to him, he approves everything on his cell phone. Whether it's a tender, it's an approval. So he's saying, I'm cutting because fraud and corruption and ethics about people. If you are giving them the tools to protect themselves, to innovate, and to be, because if you do not have transparency, where there's fraud, there's less transparency, right? Where there's corruption, you'll find a lot of structures. You'll have a very heavy structure, so that when it comes to me, it's already been cleansed. It's cleansed by people. But you want that transparency from the day the supplier says, I am happy, there it is. So for those that are not belonging to some kind of an association, a body, because what it does help as well sometimes is when you're sitting with an issue, there's a submission on your table, and very often these things are complex and you do not know what to do. It is very easy for me to call Meletswalo to say, Meletswalo, can I give you a scenario, right? Without mentioning names. Give you a scenario, this is what I heard. What are your thoughts, right? Meletswalo will quickly call a Prof. Sean. Prof. Sean, here's a scenario. What are your thoughts? What is your thinking on this? So Meletswalo, like what she has done today, for organizations and individuals to be part of this is for me, over and above the systems, the consequence management, the policies, and all of those things, for you as an individual, you need to start driving your own professionalization and for your own development, and make sure that at least protected by this environment that people like Melitswabo have created for us. Thanks, Jefferson.
Okay. Kamo, you're raising some very important element around training, which is very crucial, and also the manual processes that are being followed by organization. There's something that we all know when people say ignorance is bliss. If anyone says that ignorance is bliss, it means that if you are just unaware, if one is unaware of any unpleasant fact, you are just not bothered by it. They would, when you talk to people, they say, oh, what I don't know won't kill me. If I see something, even I forget, or I don't want to be trained. So if I get trained, that means I'll be troubled to really perform at a certain level. So sometimes I find that remaining ignorant or probably uninformed about something allows us as individuals to worry less, or not even take that accountability around it. And you really bring in an element of really how do we upskill ourselves to ensure that we can change the narrative, also change the status quo. And what you are really indicating is that us as professionals out there need to empower ourselves, because I think for us as associations, for us, mentoring, coaching, training, trying to push on behalf of professionals, we want to make sure that they are empowered. Sometimes, don't you think that, and it's just a question, by the way, don't you think that certain individuals are just not bothered by being trained and being developed because they want to continue with their unscrupulous way of doing business, or being procurement professionals, or being engineers that do not understand, or stakeholders not understanding the procurement processes, or being board members who just claim not to understand the procurement process? What are your thoughts? Because for me, I feel that some people are just unbothered around that.
May you absolutely right. I like what SARS does, right? So they say there's a carrot and a stick approach, right? They make it easier for those that want to play by the rules, and they make it difficult for those that do not want to play by the rules. So the principles is exactly that. So where the reward is bigger uh, for someone. and there's a chance that they can get away with it, then the propensity of individuals is to go there, right? To say that there's a bigger benefit, there's a bigger house, there's a bigger car for me, and I'm likely not to be caught
Mm.
for doing what I am going to do. And by the way, also, the very second thing that happens after that is that I'm not alone. I know my board member also does the same. I know my ESCO member also does the same. So we have to make it extremely difficult uh, for people to find ways, because that's why the system part is extremely important. But thirdly, what we do not do well in Letswalo, it's rewarding good behavior.
Mm.
So unfortunately, as you know yourself, so I'm going to put you on the spot, but as you know yourself, where you stood up for incompetence, I'll use the word incompetence for now because nothing has gone to the courts. But where there was I hope you can still hear me, but where you started challenging incompetence in organizations, you are quickly being pushed aside from decision making, right? Because certain things need to happen. And we know, for example, Meletswalo, for example, things where every time when we are about to go to elections, right? Every year when we're about to go to elections, we have to build stadiums,
Mm.
right? We have to build roads. We have to run conferences. We have to run training. I mean, those that are in public sector, please don't tell me that you don't know this, right? Every time we have to go to elections because political parties needs to be funded one way or the other. And then they are using the procurement system, even though we know that this thing is not in the budget. So certain individuals are appointed to be the facilitators. And you know this thing, Melitwala, every time when these people are asked, let's look at the PPE story. All of them, what were they saying? No, but I am not part of procurement. Right?
Oh,
So you have the deputy ministers and everybody, no, but I am not part of procurement. But yeah, you made sure that you are not part of procurement so that you should not be audited, right? But and then as Ndatilo Gugu said, so that we can deal with these procurement people and we shift them. That's why they are never been, they're not fired, they are shifted from one department to another
yeah.
because they are being played by someone on the, and those people um, will continue to move. They will become a deputy minister from one department, they will become a minister, they'll be shifted just like that. So those, you are so right that some individuals will remain in this process as long as our policies allows them to do so, and as long as, of course, I see the comments about the reward, but as long as the reward to the supply chain people, and unfortunately we are human beings, we need to be rewarded. We must be rewarded for our effort. If the reward is, if I can see, I mean, for example, Letswalo, if you look at the chairperson of, or let's say a person who's running a cross-functional team, a supply chain person, who's running a cross-functional team to build a how train. That person in that whole team is probably a junior, right? He's probably 3 or 4 levels below all the people in the cross-functional team. Speaking to engineers, and this poor person, he goes to the meeting, everyone is parking all their German and their French cars, and he comes like Kamachelo who drive a 1.4 Polo for 15 years, right? And it becomes extremely difficult if this person is not rewarded equal to his counterpart. So the reward is extremely important. But lastly, those people we must, and thank you to your project. There must be, we must name them and shame them.
Oh,
Our
yes.
problem is that the SIU, for example, the SIU has listed those companies, but none of them has been listed on the National Treasury database for non-compliant suppliers. None of them. So those companies, Melitswalo, they still continue to do business with the state.
then something is
even though they agreed that they were corrupt, even though their assets have been forfeited against the state, but the following day they win another tender. So that loop, and it's because of individuals, because the individuals in those companies are extremely important to the players. And that's why they will never be listed. So we must ask SIU that why are you not pushing? They are, but they mustn't stop, right? Because at the end of the day, National Treasury will say, yes, we are going to list them. But we can hold the SIU accountable because they did the investigation. And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you are the president, a family, a brother or uncle or whoever, it does not matter who you are. The process must say, if you are found wanting, you are listed, regardless of who you are. So maybe there's another conversation, Linda Masuku. I mean, not that Masuku. Hey, yeah, I'm mentioning Masuku deliberately. Sorry for that. Thanks.
We definitely will need to get into that conversation. And I think one of the items that I want to really tap into is the issue of the manual processes that are being followed by organizations. I definitely agree, it creates chaos. It's high time that organizations start looking at ERP solutions that can document an end-to-end process of the procurement, all the way from where it starts and where it ends. And I know that, and I've sat in audit and risk committees myself, whereby these audits and paperwork has just disappeared out of nowhere. So it creates a very huge destruction in the system. And the second thing, which was the last thing that you were talking about, Kamagelo, and I'm just wrapping up on your side so that I can move to Sean, is an element of suppliers that we know they have been in the industry, they have been found wanting, and they're still there. I'm going to say something to yourself and to everyone here. Let's not wait for the SIU. We must start blacklisting those organizations from our various organizations and various departments. Because if they have been found to be wanting, let's blacklist them. We can create a blacklisting policy in our organizations that helps us. So let's not wait for the SIU colleagues. We need to start saying that people that are not behaving, companies that are not behaving, we are just not going to do business with them. And it must be clear as to why we have a right to do that if we are uplifting, doing the right things and ethical procurement practices. I'm going to move to Sean. Sean, I think this conversation now taps into yourself as well. Sean, and I'm going to introduce Sean. Sean is doing a lot of work in supply chain management. I think with more than 28 years in management consulting, specializing in logistics and supply chain on its entirety, a solid track record that we know. I think most of us, especially those that are in the public sector, knows Sean as that person that's instrumental in coaching entrepreneurs and also in the public sector training as well. Very interesting conversation, Sean. Let's see your face. Where are you? So Sean now has to come and talk to us, and I want him just at a high level just to tap onto this element of training, because he's doing a lot of training with the public sector. He runs a lot of sessions on a week, I think every Wednesday, if I'm not lying, and talking about different acts and different frameworks in terms of the public sector. And Sean will talk to us around a couple of discussions. Sean, are you there? I'm not seeing your face.
I am here. I'm just
he's sorting his mic. He's got a beautiful mic. You must see that mic.
At the moment, I am unable to join you on my laptop, so I've got the phone on.
All right.
And I'll just keep the video off for the moment, just whilst I get the laptop going. So, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Sean. I know those fancy things are connected to my external microphone, which was supposed to make my voice much better. Unfortunately, everything froze. So I understand, because earlier you connected, but you can still proceed. So Sean, talk to us. The rule of law, some of the things that came out of the Zondo report. What are your thoughts around that? And we've been talking about training. What are you seeing out there in terms of the trends, in terms of the training that you are conducting in the industry?
Yes, well, thank you. And thank you very much for the opportunity. And this is such an important topic. I wonder if I may just offer a solution on one of the issues that was raised earlier around the boards. May I do that just to, before I touch on the aspect you'd like me to talk on? One of the key issues that I think we have is the delegations of authority in many of the organizations that we work in. The delegations of authority is causing a lot of the issues that we're dealing with. And I think from a solution perspective, we can do much better. Now, what am I saying? Most delegations of authority have different size transactions which are approved by different levels in the organization. And the bigger the size of the transaction, the higher the level in the organization that it goes to for approval. Now, in most organizations, the big ones, the 10, 50, 100, 200 million rand deals need to be approved by the board. And that's where the problem starts. It's those deals that many of those board members have the most interest in. Those are the deals that they want to get their hands on if they are not ethical. And so there are a few organizations that we've started to see where they're saying we've got to stop that, because approving a transaction at a board level is an operational issue. And as Kamogelo said earlier, that's what we don't want. We want the boards to be involved in oversight only. And so there are some organizations that are saying, let's take that right down to that delegations of authority issue, and we will not give the boards anything to approve. What we will do is put in place the processes in place, the information in place, so that the board can have oversight over the transaction that was approved at an operational level. And I think if many of us look at the delegations of authority that we've got, you'll see that there is a big issue in that. So let's come back to one of the points that I would like to talk through, and it's a big issue in the training. In the Zondo Commission, when you went through in the beginning, one of the recommendations was to put in place a legislation that would protect those board members that are acting in good faith. And I thought that was interesting, because this is something we've been training many of the bid committee members on for some time now. And let me give a story, tell you a little bit of a story of a particular court case. And this might make it a little bit more practical and understanding. So there's a court case that started off in 2016 in Westwood and Ekurhuleni. And what that particular court case was all about was Ekurhuleni was looking for a insurance service provider that could provide insurance against water damage. And what happened in that process was Ekurhuleni appointed a insurance service provider that was very good and competent in professional indemnity, water damage insurance, and they appointed somebody who's very good in professional indemnity insurance. Well, one of the suppliers that then had experience in this water damage insurance, then took Ekurhuleni on. They won the court case, and a very interesting decision was then taken by the judge at that point. You know, with many court cases, there's a cost decision at the end of the court case to say, now what happens to the costs? And in that particular one, the judge said, okay, so Ekurhuleni, you have lost. So as with most court cases, the cost decision follows the decision. The cost follows the decision. So Ekurhuleni then had to pay the legal fees of the winner and their legal fees. And the judge said, interestingly, that the people of Ekurhuleni, the taxpayers in Ekurhuleni, should not pay the full amount, and 50% of the costs must be paid by, and she listed 15 individuals that were involved in the tender process, right from the municipal manager down to the people that were involved in the bid committees, 15 people, and said, you 15 people will be responsible for paying 50% of the cost. And it was an interesting one because it is a practical demonstration of a big point in public procurement, which is joint and several liability, that if there is a bid committee decision which is made, then you're jointly and severally liable for the decision. And so one of the big training questions then comes up is well, why is it? Why were all 15 of them responsible for the cost? What if I was in a bid committee meeting and something similar happened? You know, that sacrificial lamb point that was raised earlier. I'm doing my job. I'm just trying to, you know, get this transaction and this tender approved, and so we can appoint somebody so that we can get this job done. I don't want to necessarily do anything unethical. And the whole question comes back to this issue of acting in good faith. And so the Zondo Commission report said, we need to put in place legislation to protect the board members that are acting in good faith. But what about the rest of the supply chain people that are acting in good faith? And the question then comes down to this issue of what is good faith? And how do I demonstrate that if I'm involved in a bid committee process, can I demonstrate that I'm acting in good faith? And I think that's something from a training perspective we could certainly pick up on and improve on. I'm just going to quickly switch over to my video, if that's okay. See if this is going to work now. All right, there we are. Let's get rid of this. Okay, is that easier now? Yeah, thank you. So that's good faith. And I think, you know, one of the questions that then comes in is to say, okay, yeah, how do I demonstrate that I'm actually acting in good faith? And one of the questions comes down to understanding legislation and training, because the laws that are in place that do actually protect procurement people in the public sector is twofold. There's one, there's existing laws. So I'm not too sure why Zondo Commission was too concerned about this. And there's the one law is in PAJA, the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, that says that you will be immune from prosecution. I forget the exact words. If you act in good faith, even if you make a mistake, but it's an innocent mistake, you will be protected. And so one of the questions around training then is, but if I make a mistake and it's an innocent mistake, but I should have known, am I acting in good faith? And one of the answers to that question is no. From a professional perspective, if you should have known and you made a mistake and that was an innocent mistake, then that would not be in good faith. There are a couple of other things that we can talk through. I'm not sure if I'm making sense at the moment, if I'm talking to your question, Lebor.
definitely are. You definitely are. And just proceed because it's very interesting in really looking at the cases like that, Sean. And I think both from the professional perspective, but also from the board, membership perspective, because I have seen boards that has been disbanded whilst we still have good board members. And you discern, obviously, there's always something called discernment. If you don't agree to certain things in the board. But if you're a minority and a wrong decision has been taken, then it will be noted that you did not agree, to such decision. But what I like is that you're bringing it further to really saying that procurement professionals, if they were part of the bid committee, they were part of the whole process, how protected are they as well? Because also, for an example, the board members normally have got this professional liability insurance that also covers them, being board members. And so
That's
that
right.
if any case that happens, then the board members are protected. Now, let's talk about the professionals and other people within the value chains, the people that are operational in that process. How protected are they? Because you're bringing a very, very critical element, which speaks to now being, at the end of the tunnel as a procurement professional, what to do and what not to do. I mean, there's other discussion that we can have around professional indemnity for procurement professionals. How do they get protected in instances like this? It's another conversation that we need to have.
Sure.
I think for the purpose of today, I think this is very relevant. So you can proceed with that, Sean.
So I don't think, personally, I don't think that procurement professionals need professional indemnity. In these issues, the laws are in place in the public sector to protect the professionals, and it's very clear. It says that if you make a mistake or you do something but wrong, and it's in good faith, you will be protected. But the question then comes into this is, how does a procurement professional demonstrate that they acted in good faith? So you raised the one point around in a bid committee meeting, you raise your discontent. You say, I do not believe that this is the right thing that we should do. Please, can you minute that I disagree with this decision? So you would raise that, you'd minute that. But how do you demonstrate? And one of the interesting things that came out in that case was Westwood, I think Westwood Ekurhuleni, if I'm not mistaken. Westwood Ekurhuleni was the name of the case. One of the things that she said in that case is that throughout the trial, and there were actually, the trial went on a number of times. I think the last eventual decision happened in January 2020. So about four years.
Where do you
4 years that case dragged on. And what the judge said when she made the decision is that throughout the case, listen carefully, no one had ever raised their hand to say we made a mistake. No one had ever said, you know what, Judge, we did the wrong thing. They were dead silent throughout that. Now, it could be because of the culture and the environment in Ekurhuleni at the time did not support them from saying we made a mistake. But just she said, if somebody had just raised their hand and said we made a mistake, she would have had something to continue with. Thanks, Rose Westwood Ekurhuleni. And so I think that's an important start, right? Is just as professionals, we need to be prepared to say where we have made a mistake or not. And that's a starting point. The other question comes down to, as a procurement professional, is, and I'm thinking particularly now, Kamogelo raised the point about technology. A lot of the bid committee meetings are happening online, in virtual. And we have a terrible culture in South Africa is we don't like cameras. And so when we have these meetings, we don't put cameras on. It's very seldom that we have a meeting, a bid committee meeting, and everybody's got their cameras on. And it could be because of the technology position that we're in, and bandwidth and data and a whole range of issues like that. But if there was ever to be a case and you sat in a bid committee meeting and there was a finding and they went back to the recording, and in the recording you never had your camera on and you never said anything, how would you defend yourself by saying that I still acted in good faith? Yes, I know I made a mistake, but I acted in good faith. And so it comes down to some very practical things that we've got to start learning as professionals in this space, is how do I demonstrate in meetings, in online discussions, that I am indeed acting in good faith, truly with integrity? How do we do that? And so, there's some things that we could start to learn about, putting your camera on every now and again, engaging in the discussion. There's some really interesting training that happens that we do around acting in good faith, around engaging and talking, and there's not enough of that happens very often, and particularly supply chain people are very often camera shy, microphone shy, don't like to engage. We just want to get this tender done, we evaluate this thing quickly. And as Kamagelo is just pointing out that he's not camera shy. And we've got to overcome those things. These are not necessarily SIPs and SAPEX training things, but are so fundamental and so important in how we work as a professional in the process. I think I've said enough.
Sean, thank you for that. I mean, this process is one process that's very critical, and you bring an element of saying that us as procurement professionals, firstly, how do we sell ourselves? Because we cannot afford to be quiet on matters that are speaking to our profession. And how do we ensure that people understand the work that we are doing? Because it's very critical that we are out there, and part of the process, which is very critical, I think, for us to understand, is that procurement professionals are accountable from the process, from the start until to the end. So that being the case, we have to be in control to be able to guide everyone, because you are the owner of the whole process. And being the owner of the whole process, you are going to be gauged in really understanding, do you understand the work that you are doing? You cannot be just evaluating the process for the sake of just doing it. So I love what Sean is saying, that there's a concept of good faith. With regards to this case law that is coming forward, we will definitely be challenged. And the question is, if you are a practitioner out there, how do you justify your role? How do you justify being quiet as well in instances like this? Very, very important that we are aware of that and understanding our role within the entire process. Because if you see ourselves and all the pointers that are brought forward in terms of the issues of corruption, it has taken years. When anything hits the table, then they're going to revert to who was the owner of that process and who will be the first person that is taken to task. You have to respond. The files, you must have them, and you will be able to demonstrate where you did not agree with the process. What did you do? Did you say yes? Did you still proceed? Did they put a gun on your head? Those are the questions that you will be asked. Did they put a gun in your head? Did they kick you out of the organization? Those are the things that comes up. Sean, you can comment. I can see you want to say something there.
I mean, you're talking about the files, and I think there's a lot more to this than just the files disappearing. Mm-hmm. I love the fact, Lebo, that you raised the Transparency Corruption Index, and what's really interesting is, and you pointed out who those countries are that are the least corrupt. And so one of the interesting things that we've got to ask as South Africans is what is it that they are doing in those countries that we can potentially learn from? And it was so fascinating for myself and my business partner, Henry Carlson. I think Henry is online. We can't speak Dutch, Danish and all those Scandinavian countries that were on top there. But the one that actually has been on top for many, many years now is New Zealand.
Oh, yes.
And it's very interesting when we went into the New Zealand policies for public procurement. There's a word that popped out there, which struck us. And that word was probity. And the dictionary definition of probity talks about uprightness and integrity. But in the procurement space, it's got a very, very different definition. Now, the auditors, and I don't know if there are any auditors online, and I'd be happy to engage with anybody in Gauteng that is in the province of Gauteng. They've picked up on this notion of probity, and they've created a service offering called a probity audit.
Yes.
And the probity audit is a compliance audit.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, probity is not compliance. Let me say that again. Probity is not compliance. And I think, you know, if I was to challenge Gauteng, if we looked at Gauteng, and Gauteng has had this probity audit in place before COVID happened, why is it that Gauteng, we had really, really bad corruption during PPE procurement? Why is it? And can I tell you why? It's because probity is not compliance. In the procurement space, if you'd like a definition of probity in procurement, it's evidence of transparency. Evidence of transparency. I was in Botswana a couple of years ago, and Botswana was the least corrupt country in Africa. And I went through a discussion with them and I said, okay, now if I am in a quotations process, I submitted a quotation yesterday, the quotation closed yesterday, and I phone you up now and I ask you on the phone, did you get my quotation? Yes, I did. Cool. Will you give me the price of the other quotations you've received? In South Africa, we get into a whole big intellectual discussion around whether we can or whether we can't give the price. And then we say, but we do that for tenders anyway, so why can't we do that for quotations? And in Botswana, they cut me straight away. They said, Sean, we do not talk to suppliers on the phone. Because there's no evidence of transparency of that discussion. And so as soon as we got into emergency procurement with COVID, our habits continued. We continue to talk on the phone to suppliers because we have not inculcated this understanding of this issue called probity. We think it's just compliance. It's not. It's because that phone call, Kamchela would know, may not have been, what is my price and how does the price compare to others? It could be, well, by the way, how is can you, sorry, just sorting out, can you, okay, I hear you. I'm going to be sending through my quotation now. Would you mind just slipping in the updated quotations? But we don't know, right? We don't know because we haven't figured out this thing called probity yet. And so I think, just in closing, I think that we could do a lot more at just maybe learning from some of the other organizations and countries around the world that some practices and bring those in as well. And yeah, there we are.
Oh, yeah, Sean, we're talking about probity studies. It's a fancy word that's been used for the past few years, according to me. And, they come and check, who are you related to? We're just getting some evidence out there. But I think the process itself around unethical practices and making sure that there is compliance is really being able to check, we know, for an example, from the public sector, if you're working for the public sector, you're not supposed to have a company operating and so and so. So the link that happens in the corruption system is that you find yourself as an employee of a public sector or even in a private company, and you get your cousin that's not the same surname with yourself being put in the process. And that's how it basically happens. So proper process is really being able to do supply intelligence that is very detailed to the core in matching people. I always say that if you look at our system across South Africa, it's a system that has got some bit of deficiencies on it because, it's like Interpol. I always use Interpol as an example. If you want to find someone, we need a robust system like that, where you're able to link people, link organization, link unethical, suppliers out there, service providers, people to companies, because you already have a track record as to where they are coming from. It's the same as board members and executives that are leading, mayors, municipal managers. If they're already linked to certain systems, they need to be flagged out there. I keep on repeating such things. It needs to be done, obviously, in the process. We need to create this system of transparency. Someone laughed at me the last time and I was saying, I wish there was a phone when, because you can use your phone to scan, a product, and it will tell you which product it is. So you take a phone and scan Sean, then you can say, oh, this is Sean Scott, this company, this, But all I'm trying to bring forward, colleagues, is we need an element of transparency that links up people, that links up companies, that links up the issues. We have systems, obviously, with POPI in terms of Information Act. And there's a lot of things to consider around that process. But we need to have a level of intelligence that is created to allow us not to use the same companies, the same individuals, the same directors, the same procurement professionals. And I think that is the importance of these conversations, to say, what are we taking forward? And I want us to use the next few minutes to look at the questions that has been put on the chat box. Because out of everything that we have been discussing, and for everyone that has just joined and everyone that has been here, some of the elements that we have been discussing up to so far has been speaking around professionalization. We've been talking about the public procurement bill, the ethics as a way of living and running of organization, professionalization, board oversights, the report itself out there that is part 1 and part 2, coming from the corruption scandals that we are seeing in the industry. We are looking at these recommendations and saying that how do we also protect ourselves? The concept of good faith. How do you ensure that as procurement professionals, you are empowered, you make decisions, and you make sure that proper processes are followed as well? So I would want to really start seeing more of your questions coming through before we go into our next panel that will be starting at 11 o'clock. I hope that they are ready on their side. There are a couple of questions that are on our chat box. I hope you got to have a look at them, but I'm going to read some, and those that I have not picked up, please just flag them. There's one, some of them are just comments saying that understanding of corporate governance by the board of directors is very underrated. There are many directors of boards who just don't understand the basic of corporate governance. It's one comment. Do we assume that the trained people are likely to not commit corruption? So we've been talking about empowerment. We're talking about Kamukhalo as well on your side. An element of having people understand training, belonging to a body, doesn't mean that they will not commit any corruption out there. And then the third part is the biggest problem is human nature, as the players always finding a loophole in everything and manipulating the system as well. There's always bullying by the accounting officers, and many manual processes are not followed as well, which creates chaos. And then misaligned policy or legislative framework, or conflicting pieces of legislation also pose a problem. Maybe the first one we can start with yourself, Dr. Taylor, with Dr. Lukubu. And that's the comment around understanding of corporate governance. I know you've touched on it, and maybe it would be good that everyone understands the type of training that the board of directors have to go through with the Institute of Directors as well, and what are the other legislative framework that they should be able to understand. Maybe you can just touch a bit on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I appreciate the comments that have been made. Very critical, so, and yes, maybe my colleagues on the other hand should be able maybe to touch more deeper into issues that are related to corporate governance. But your corporate governance policy, it is clear in terms of what is expected from your directors, your board of directors, that the responsibility that is conferred on them, it's part of the responsibilities that they need to ensure that are implemented or knowledgeable about it. And that's why I raised it earlier. I said, one of the problems that we have in this country, it's where you are going to appoint people that don't have the skill or the knowledge of a particular area, and don't even understand corporate governance, but they come from a political background, and people are being offered these government director positions because of political favors that they are doing for somebody else, and that's an issue that really needs to be touched on, which I think I'll hand over to my colleagues maybe to touch better on that. But there is something very critical that Sean highlighted earlier, and I just want to run through it quickly. To say, as a country, how do we ameliorate? How do we correct the situation? How do we look at other countries that are doing better in terms of your perception index? And we need, as a country now, one, to make sure that we implement our beautiful laws and acts and policies that we have. That is implementation, it's a problem in this country. Two, we need to prosecute without fear or favor. Because once we are going to ensure that only a certain individual is being prosecuted for a fraction of what has happened in that contract, that creates a problem. Now, I suppose maybe at some point, I'm not sure because I see we are already running out of time. It's the many countries that you see that are doing good in terms of their levels. It's because they've got an independent, a single independent anti-corruption agency where all these things, all these investigations, your prosecutions, your forensic accountants and auditors are under one roof, where you're going to deal with corruption holistically and not just individualize it. I will pause there, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. In tackling other comments, Kamohelo, I just only want to quickly add to Dr. Lukubu that some of the training that board members have to go through, besides what Dr. Lukubu's Institute of Directors, you can go through part 1 and part 2 of being a director, you go through ethics training as well, and you get to a certain level as part of that process. So it should be mandatory, in fact, that even board members that are appointed would have gone through such training, instead of just getting everyone that doesn't even understand that there is PFMA, there is being a director in terms of the King 4 report as well. What does it really mean, for yourself as a board member? So that's just my addition on that. Kamohelo, you can take the next comment around the training. And does it necessarily mean that anyone that has gone through training will not be able to commit any corruption? Gamo, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry for that. No, I was looking at the corruption index to prove or disprove this narrative, and I'm not going to mention those countries by name. But if you look at countries that score 13, 14, right up until to 30. These are some of the countries, at least speaking on the continent, that has a high number of professors per square meter. So for me, and some of these countries, we actually benchmark. If you look at some of our professors' universities, they come from some of those countries, right? Or are doctors, and because fraud just becomes sophisticated. The more educated you are, it doesn't touch your persona. It's just a piece of paper. It's just knowledge that you put in your head. And if you want to steal, you just become more sophisticated. So as my prof said there, that transparency, transparency, transparency. Make sure that you protect this process, ensure that there's transparency for suppliers, for executives, and for yourself as a supply chain person. Because it's also important to you as a supply chain person to know many times when submissions comes to your table, if you are the head of supply chain and the level you've been there, there's so many deals that have already taken place that you don't even aware, that you are not even aware, right? But you will be protected, and that is shown has told us why that honest mistake will be protected, but because you didn't know. But this day and age, there should never be any approval of a supplier that does not go through some type of a due diligence. And and a simple due diligence is, I'm going to put the suppliers directors on the system. I'm going to try to link it with my with the company database and see if there are any possible links. Just a simple desktop exercise. Just a very simple desktop exercise. And that report continues to go to whoever the authorities are for approval. So they should never be a supplier. If a supplier says no, they can't, then they should not be doing business with yourself, right? When a supplier, before we load them on our database, we continue to do these things. And every time when we go to a CEO and say, this is what we want to do, and they say, no, hang on. then you know that they probably, they don't want, and many times it's not even supply chain professionals, right? That they look, it's people on the other side that do not want this transparency. But we can for supply chain professionals that are there, we can help you to go and have that one meeting with the powers that be, with the team that is here. Take the people here and say, this is how transparency, this is what transparency means. It is not probity, because once you put probity, it means we don't trust you, right? And we have seen how probity actually was used to perpetuate fraud and corruption as well, as Senator Deshon alluded to, because it's not compliant. So my parting shot, Melitwalo, is that we should not do one of these things. It's all of them together. So yes, policy is important. Yes, governance is important. Yes, transparency is extremely important. Systems are extremely important. Innovation and training. So all of these things works together, not in silo. If you push one over the other, unfortunately, we will find gaps, or fraud will always find gap. But it's implementation of all of these tools to deal decisively with this unethical behavior. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think you are still talking to yourself.
Yes. I want to take just two last questions, because these are very good questions, and I would want also, if we are not able to tackle them out, all the panelists now, that you respond directly on the chat box. I would really appreciate that. But I will take two other questions. The other thing that one question that has been asked is, what laws are there to protect procurement professionals in this instance, because there's another comment that was very, very important that was raised, that it doesn't matter that there's a delegation of authority, you know, that people are trained, but what normally happens is that with the procurement decisions, the chairperson, the bid committee members has got the discretion ultimately to make a decision as well. So I think more around how do we get and ensure that procurement professionals are protected in this whole process. Sean, maybe you can just tackle that for us.
Sure. Thank you. Well, there's, yeah, and I'm not a lawyer. So this is talking to lawyers that have said this is what protects us. And the first one is PAJA, Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, and it's section 10A. And 10A says, no person is criminally or civilly liable for anything done in good faith. Important. So that's the first one. The second one is a court case that happens. So there's some case law, and it's an old one, 2007 Constitutional Court case, Steenkamp against the Provincial Tender Board in the Eastern Cape. And very, very important statement there, which is actually the wording which has been used now by the State Capture Commission, which says compelling public consideration. You're immune from damages claims in respect of their incorrect or negligent but honest decision. However, if an administrative or statutory decision is made in bad faith or under corrupt circumstances, you will be nailed. So that's the case law. And those two I've put in the chat. So that's what's there at the moment. And certainly case law is law. So don't think that we need to necessarily legislate it, but it certainly is something that that we can use. And I think it's the important point again is just, you know, how do we as a procurement professional demonstrate that we acted in good faith?
Yes. Okay. So the last question, which is for everyone, because I'm closing the panel now. The question is, what do you think are some of the solutions and recommendations thus far to some of the highlighted problems? Because we've highlighted problems, we've indicated the issues, what should happen as well. At a high level, in closing, what do you believe are the solutions, recommendations at a high level that we need to start looking at based on the problem? Because we've been talking about this thing for years, and I think it's becoming more of an immediate items that we need to really focus on from organization, from us as individuals, and from us as procurement practitioners, from us as organizations as well. At a high level, any recommendations, any solutions? Is there anything that we can take forward based on your discussion to further to the probably to the RSA government? Because part of this consolidation, I mean, there's a response. There's exactly what we are saying. We are aware. What are we taking forward? And then how do we also empower procurement professionals that are already here to be able to go and make change within their organizations at a high level?
Can I make a suggestion level? And I think, I think a lot about this. I think corruption is as big an issue as apartheid was. And I keep thinking about, I don't know why, I keep thinking about a book I read a couple of years ago by Walter Sisulu on how the ANC created structures to fight impimpies, to fight the system, and those structures were incredibly important. And I don't think we've got the structures in place. And I don't think it's just laws. I think it's structures, and I think it's structures for people. You know, the cells that were put in place in the early days of fighting apartheid, those cells were to grow.
Sean, we're missing you. We're just losing you here.
I think he's frozen. Maybe we can continue until we get him back.
Yes, exactly. Dr. Legubo, maybe just proceed whilst we're waiting for Sean.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Chair.
And I don't think we've got some people that
Okay.
are fighting this.
Okay, Sean.
So yeah, we've got some challenges with our internet in the area. So I was just saying, I think that I've huge respect for organizations such as SAFEX and SIPS, but I don't think those are the structures. I think we need structures for the people involved in procurement, and I think that it's time that we looked at in the public sector. It's time that we looked at creating a membership organization for public procurement practitioners and professionals.
Thank you for that, Sean. Dr. Legubo.
Chair, thank you so much, and thank you for Sean as well for sharing his thoughts. And I think what we need to be aware of it's that South Africa is a signatory to many regional and international instruments. Your SADC, your UN conventions, which speaks directly on how to deal with corruption. And the idea of establishing an independent anti-corruption agency, having also read one of the other recommendations that there's an independent procurement agency that must be established. I have as well in my studies made this particular recommendations to the government to say the reason why we are not moving in terms of dealing with corruption, it's that we have too many call them agencies that exist in the country that have duplicate functions that they are doing, and once we take the position of establishing an independent anti-corruption agency, which then will take over all the responsibility in terms of investigating any form of corruption. Yeah, you don't have necessarily even have to separate it to be procurement corruption or whatever kind of corruption. This agency will encompass each and every kind of corruption, fraud, and maladministration that will be taking place in the country. So you take particular example of the many countries, as we highlighted earlier, that how did these countries, why are they doing good in their system? It's because they've got an independent anti-corruption agency that focuses only on these particular issues. And I think I have moved for that. I still have those recommendations to say to the government, let us ensure that our international and regional anti-corruption instruments are being implemented in this country. Our plethora of laws and acts and policies that we have in this country must also be implemented without fear or favor. And this is how we're going to move this country forward. Thank you, Chair. I will pause there.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Is Kamugelo there? I can see that I'm not seeing him. All right. Well, you heard it for yourself from the first three panelists. Thank you so much for your insight, colleagues. I mean, it has been great listening to yourself. And please, there may be some questions that keeps on coming up. I will request that please just respond to them. And I am noting everything that you put on the chat box. It's very insightful, and we're grateful for your contribution. And it will be good to hear if you have any proposal, any recommendations out there that we need to take forward. And I'm seeing a lot of comments that are coming through from your side, that one of the things that we need to do is just keep government outside of procurement. I mean, it's one of the things that is coming up, that, you know, this segregation of duties, we have to look at it, keep politicians out of the procurement process. We need to also make sure that there's training, there's development, there's empowerment that happens in the industry. So which takes me to the next panel, colleagues. Any more questions, please just send them there. For those that are in LinkedIn, if you have some questions, please post them. I will check them so that we can respond. So our second panelist that is coming through now is a panel that will be focusing on a couple of items, colleagues. And what they will be focusing on is an element, number one, on research that is out there, what is happening out there from the industry, the Procurement Council. I think most of you have heard about the Procurement Council and the work that we've been doing for the past few years. You probably need also feedback and understanding, are we really accelerating this professionalism that we want to institute within our profession? We'll have a discussion around the skills and the competencies that are needed in the future, considering the challenges and the dynamics that we are being faced with from Mr. Ngube. And then Ms. Sari from SIPS will focus on this ethics report and more professionalization as well, and the interventions and commitment that is coming from SIPS. And also I wanted to hear that from Kamahalo from the SAPICS perspective in terms of the commitment. What are we taking forward and what are we going to do? Because we are doing a lot of work for the past few years. We need to accelerate so that we show progress. So I will want to introduce Professor Marcus Ambe. Prof, where are you? Prof is in the middle of Cameroon, I know that, or somewhere, you know, outside the country having some, you see now, he's having some fun. If you start seeing some cocktail there, you can see that Prof is having some fun on the background. So Prof, welcome. Let me tell you, Professor Ambe, he's a thought leader in supply chain management, and he's a professor at the School of Public and Operations Management at UNISA. He's a researcher, a coach, mentor, and presenter. He has founded and is a president of the African Institute for Supply Chain Research. Those who knows it, it's called AISCR. And he also focuses.
I was trying to, thank you very much, Lebo. In fact, I was trying to move away from the beach and try to be around work now. So I just want to also thank you so much, and just to indicate that I might be having connectivity issues. So I'll try and put off the camera.
Okay. So, Prof, we want to hear what is happening with the Procurement Council. What work are we doing out there? Are we making any tractions with professionalization? I mean, you would have seen from the recommendations coming from the report part 1 and part 2, there's a level of professionalization that has been requested. And specifically, you know, what has been happening is that we have been asked that we need to start looking at the industry, start looking at ensuring that we enhance our public procurement system. But I keep on always reminding people that it's not just about public procurement, it's also private procurement. How do we ensure that there is professionalism around it as well? How do we create this professional body for procurement officers where we may ensure that any individuals are struck for misconduct? We know what SAICA is doing, and there's a lot of work that I think we should be learning from their side. So can you give us your insights around that, Prof?
Okay, thank you very much, Lebo. Colleagues, I hope you can hear me. Lebo, can you confirm that I'm audible?
Confirm, Prof.
All right, thank you so much. Indeed, I want to say that the session is actually very important, and research in itself is very, very lacking in the continent and the country in particular. The reason why we thought of, the establishment of the Institute is that we have a couple of organizations that are focusing on supply chain management, and professional organizations as well, but they are limited institutions that are focusing on research. And the research in itself on supply chain management in the country and in the continent is very limited. You would permit me, colleagues, because I'm going to the Institute focusing on a continental perspective, and I'm going to draw in a lot of perspective also from the country. Just to let you know that most organizations, or successful organizations today, unfortunately in the country, we do not have a lot of trust in our organizations in the private sector to rely on research institutions. As I've indicated, if you look at organizations, Alphabet, Hawaii, they're spending millions on research and development. And these are organizations that are doing very well in the area of innovation. If you look at in a continental perspective, you begin to ask yourself, how much are we spending in the country to be able to get insights on innovations, to be able to enhance our professionalization, our practices in terms of supply chain? I can tell you clearly, Lebo, that no country in the continent is spending 1% of its GDP on research, which we need to be able to do more. And that is exactly the reason why we created the Institute, to be able to support development on supply chain management in the continent. We have learned a lot from COVID-19, the quest for localization, industrialization, the Zondo Commission itself, highlighting a lot of issues around ethics and professionalization of procurement and supply chain management in the country. And therefore, we all have that responsibility to be able to take our profession forward. Just as a way to highlight some of the key responsibilities that the Institute have been driving, the Institute core value proposition can be shaped into 4, which is that of supporting research and development, supporting education and capacity building, supporting advisory services, as well as outreach and networking. In terms of the research, we've been able to do some of key research in the country. Some of them relates to the aspect of contract management, where we did a feasibility benchmark study in some of the municipalities in the country, and then to develop a contract management training manual, which was supported by GIZ and also National Treasury. In terms of our outreach, which is where the bulk of the work we have done, we started with the Pan-African Supply Chain Management Summit, which was well attended in 2021. We have done so well with capacity building, supporting masters and doctoral students. I always give an example. We all talking about capacity building. Yes, we are still lacking the area of degree programs or certificate program that we need to come up with. The question is that we have over 26 public universities in the country, government officials that are working. Where are they being to have one public universities that is running a supply chain management program in the public sector? Now, if we need to be able to develop that, the development of masters and doctoral students, which to my understanding may help in a feeder approach, developing the degrees and the honor students. We have had a lot of conversation about creating sensitization on procurement in high schools. The question that I'm asking is, who are those to develop the curriculum and who are those to teach them? Because it is not just to have a program, it is to have a program that was developed based on sound research. And therefore, it is very, very fundamental that we develop master's and doctoral capacity. As of date, between 2020 and 2021, we conducted over 39 research support webinar services to programs to capacitate master's and doctoral students. We started a program in 2021, which we call the Supply Chain Management Game Changer Series, to share knowledge on the latest development and insights around topical issues on supply chain management. But I'm not going to stop there, just to extend on the aspect of how the Research Council or the Supply Chain Research Institute is working with another arm that we're working on, which is the Interim Supply Chain Management Council in the country. The council was actually developed to be able to fast track and help supply chain management professionalization in the country. In fact, reading the recommendations of the Zondo Commission, it tells us that we are already a step ahead in that particular initiative in building supply chain capacity in the country. The whole objective of the Interim Council is that we want to establish supply chain management as a discipline within the South African educational system, define national set of norms and standards, develop a framework for career pattern that will allow for progression, articulation, portability, transferability, and recognition, and the development of a framework for ethical standard in the country. We have those that are moving from probably those that have completed SIPS qualification, MSIPS, that wants to study with you.
We are losing you with your network.
For example, how are you going to ensure that there's a clear articulation path towards professionalization? Because when we are talking about professionalization with ethics, we need to be able to, all right, I did question about the network. Can you hear me? Hello, Lebo, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but you keep on breaking, but you can hear you. You can still proceed.
All right, thank you very much. So the essence of that is to be able to protect the profession and to protect the professionals. We have gotten case studies on the abuse in the system from the political and executive, political leadership in different spheres of the government that influences and impacts on procurement and supply chain management within the various spheres of government. Now, within the structure of the Interim Supply Chain Management Council, we have been able to establish committees to be able to help the transformation part. But if I start first within the structure, which the council is residing or being domiciled at the National Treasury, with the chairperson being there, we have supported by 2 deputy chairpersons, one looking at issues of professionalization, and the other looking at issues of technical standard and competency framework, which is myself, and that of professionalization by Sari. Now, we have established 4 committee structures. The first committee structure is that of the career pattern and continuous professional development. The second is that of supply chain professionalization, ethics, and code of conduct. The third is that of technical standard and competencies. And the fourth is that of the stakeholders committee. And of course, the constituent of the country itself is made up of the various stakeholders of supply chain management in the country, professional organizations that are in the space, and some of the key work that has been done to date or achievements of the council. It includes the development or the establishment of an international and local benchmarking study, which was conducted first to establish the nature of and functionality or the status of the council. And the findings overwhelmingly support that the council should be established based on promulgation from Parliament and it should take the form, engage on a study on the development rollout of the council. We also embark on branding for the development of technical standard and competency framework. That standard, which was developed, take into considerations benchmarking from Ghana, Zambia, North America, USA, Canada, UK, Scotland, including professional organizations, SIPs, SEPICs that are in the country, and many others. And that document, which has been developed to support professionalization, it is work in progress, but it details on how and give directions on professionalization in the country. And just to note that the work of the council support professionalization from both the public and private sector perspective. High level. Hello. All right. I don't know if I should pause and give others opportunity.
Yes, in fact, I wanted to pause around that because you've brought through some few elements in terms of the research that has been done from African Institute and also the lack, looking at the education and supply chain in the public sector and really looking at specific modules, specific, what do I call it, from the education perspective, ensuring that there is a court specifically just focusing on public sector procurement. And also you have spoken around the issue of the profession itself. I want us to touch on the issue of the profession itself. And like you're saying that it's all work in progress. As a practitioner out there, I know I've been asked a couple of times that level, you are part of this technical standards, there's Professor Amber, there's SIPs, there's SAPICs. What is the progress? What are you guys doing right there? I mean, it's good to see that we are making progress, and I'm aware of that. I think for the purpose of the practitioners, it would be good for them to understand to what extent and how far do we think we will be busy with this whole process, because there's a sense of belonging we are seeing coming from everyone that we are talking to. Maybe you can just elaborate a bit on that.
Thank you very much, Lebo. Indeed, I was still to come to that. A lot of work has been done. Unfortunately, it may not be visible in the public space and what we've been doing. And first part of this year, we're looking forward to a roadshow to sensitize the supply chain management community on the work that is being done. We have those committees, and there are certain vacancies that are open in the committees, but from a council perspective, a decision was taken that let us all open to the general community and get supply chain practitioners to be aware of it, and then have a system just like we did in 2008 for nomination processes and for others to be part of the committee structures. I know that you are also part of the working committees, but we need to be able to galvanize and get the committees to be fully functional. But in terms of the council, everything is working well. So not too long from now, I'm sure the supply chain community will be receiving communications from the stakeholders committee. We already developed a stakeholder communication plan, which will be out and be disseminated very, very soon. Thank you, Lebo.
All right. Then I'm going to bring one of the recommendations that is coming from the discussion on the first panelist from Sean and also Dr. Likubo. And one of the things that they are saying is that we need a structure. And then there's a structure that needs to be the structure for the people. And this should be a structure that is really, really focusing on all these challenges that we are, is the procurement council, the structure that we want. That's supposed to really drive all these issues of unethical practices in the industry, according to you?
I think I would say yes. That's why when I spoke, I mentioned the fact that the recommendations of the Zondo Commission with professionalizations, I mean, the key things that they mentioned, I believe that we are already ahead of it in terms of the structure. Now, the structure of the council will be redefined once it has gone through the act from Parliament, and it's been registered fully with SAQA as a professional body. I'll just give you a little example, because when we talk about professionalization, there are different arms that we need to be able to manage. For example, you've mentioned vividly about the area of capacity building. We need to make sure that we have the various arms, private in the country. We all need to be able to work together. Aspect of the technical standard and of higher education to be able to, they need to support this process. They will also need, by way of standard in working, to be able to champion the development of competence system framework for universities. And what we're working is in line with practice. So if you talk about the structure, what we currently have is an interim structure, and the structure would then be established fully once it's been registered, and every stakeholders would have a representation, which would then be guided by the responsible portfolio in terms of a ministry to be able to shape it. And you would be aware that this aspect of professionalization also came in when we had the draft public procurement bill. And we're looking at a procurement regulator and stuff. So the whole idea is that we need some level of independence in terms of professionalization, because once it's sitting within an arm of government, it becomes difficult. If you look at, you've mentioned SICA, mentioned issue of the Nursing Council, the EXA and the rest. We also had a representation from EXA to be able to help us as we move with this journey. So all what is happening now is on an interim basis. We are doing an interim work towards the establishment of the council, which I believe strongly that it will be that structure, the proper structure will be established. And we've already done actually a business plan looking at all how the composition of the structure will look like. I strongly believe that the formation of the council will help to address the supply chain or procurement issues that we're having in the country. Thank you.
All right. I want to see if there is any expectations from the from the professionals out there in terms of the structure of the council. And I think it's very comforting for everyone that is really can hear that there is progress that is happening in terms of professionalization. There is an interim structure that is out there that's looking at the standards, let's look at professionalization. And there's a lot of learnings that we are taking from the SICA, the CISA, EXA, the organizations that exist in the industry. So much of work is happening there. Tell me, Prof, and at a high level, is there any country, I mean, from the research perspective that we can quickly snap out? I mean, you brought in Hawaii and a couple of other countries where research has been done. In terms, is there any country specifically that has got a procurement council that wants to focus on the similar issues that we have in South Africa?
Interestingly, Lebo, when you get in there, in fact, I was saying that, no, let me just come in, and you were just tapping on what's in my mind, to say what the council is trying to do is not something unique from the country perspective. You know very well that supply chain management is an emerging field. We actually saying in the country that it is not yet a discipline. And we are working for it towards becoming a discipline. And globally, most institutions, because of the advanced nature of the countries, they work on an association basis. And they do not have a regulatory board from a supply chain point of view. I'll give you an example just to say in America, even in fact, feasibility studies that I was doing, a lot of their focus looks at when they talk about supply chain, they look at what logistics, transport. So the dynamics around the evolution of supply chain globally, supply chain management has no uniform definition. But what is supply chain is generally accepted. But supply chain management itself, different institutions and different organizations, they have different norms and standards. From our country perspective, what we're trying to do is to professionalize And if you have to professionalize, because you need to be able to have those sets of norms and standards in place. Without that, there can be no professionalization. Now, the unique nature of supply chain management in South Africa and the South African government is the fact that because of the challenges of procurement and the procurement transformation, the country decided to use an appellation, supply chain management, to define its procurement, of which the supply chain in quote is not being used. And that's why when you go to different places, you talk about supply chain in the government, they're asking you whether you're talking about procurement, public procurement. I just want to bring that. But now, in the context in the country, we have
Okay, Prof.
case examples that we can, or that we are emulating, which we are not reinventing the wheel. And we have said it. SAICA, we've talked about engineers that we can follow. You have National Institute of Government Procurement and has, yes, can you hear me? I was trying to expatiate on the question and to say in a nutshell, we have countries in the continent, for example, Ghana, we have Kenya, we have Zambia, that they have moved forward with the professionalization of public procurement that we can look up to. Thank you, Lebo.
Very, very interesting. Now I want to bring Mr. Ngube. I hope you are there, Mr. Ngube, and Sari as well. And Mr. Ngube, for me, I want you to pick up on what Prof. Ambe is talking about in terms of the training, in terms of the skills, and I want to really touch a bit in terms of how are we looking like from the capacity perspective and the capability perspective and the skills and the academia side. But before you do that, I want to introduce you. Just tell the people who you are. So I think for most of you, you've seen Mr. Ngube, very instrumental and advocate for supply chain management out there. He is a senior lecturer at supply chain management at the Graduate School of Business Leadership, SBL, in UNISA. And he's a specialist and operation researcher with huge experience in terms of program management, project management, and supply chain management as a whole. I think you've seen him a lot. Last research as well, quantitative modeling is one of his strongest points, statistical analysis and modelation and modeling as well. Mr. Ngube contribute to best practices in the industry, is very keen and one of the avid players that wants to make sure that there is professionalization in the industry and ensuring as well that from the skills perspective, we have the right skills that are driving the right behavior in our professionals. So Mr. Ngube, you had it. Prof. Ambe is telling us skills, skills, skills. Everyone is commenting around skills as well, the training. But my question has always been, I think I've always said it. I'm a student that studied purchasing, logistics, supply chain management. And if I have to look at my track record of studying, I cannot tell you that there was a specific module that focused on ethics as part of my training. I want to hear your view around that, Mr. Ngube.
Thank you so much, Lebo, and good morning to all that are here. It was actually good to hear some voices, some familiar voices, including those that are coming from afar as Cameroon. Prof, I hope I'm audible to you with your network connections. I think the first part is—
Thanks, I can hear you very well.
Thanks, Prof. The first part is really to echo what Prof. Ambe has been alluding to, both from a research perspective and also from the evolution of the developments from a supply chain council perspective. I think a lot of work has gone in, a lot of effort has been put in, both by the practitioner space, but also by the voluntary professional bodies that occupy the different spaces in the supply chain value chain. And that collaboration needs to be really, really commended. at the onset of the conversations, I thought there might be some territoriality with people sort of protecting their own turf. But when we started engaging in those working committees, it was clear that we were all faced by the same challenges, and we want a singular voice with particular teeth from an organ or from a pronouncement by Parliament, so that it can speak with authority on supply chain issues. For me, as we've indicated, Lebo, my passion has always been around capacity development, around skills development. That's why I found my niche within a university setup, within a business school setup. I will probably talk more or lean more towards where I am now than from where I started. I started dealing with undergraduate issues, but for the purposes of our engagement today, I'll lean more towards our graduate or postgraduate or executive education orientation. When we moved to a new qualification framework as a country, and sort of ring-fenced masters to NQF level 9 and PhDs to NQF level 10, we had a serious introspection around the MBAs and the MBL qualifications, which were at NQF level 8 of the previous structure, which then were now recalculated and moved to NQF level 9. It sort of created a gap in terms of how do we continue with the pipeline to the MBAs and the MBLs and other new masters that are now anchored at NQF level 9. So a lot of us in the university space looked at that gap that was existing in the NQF level 8. Some developed honors programs, but for most of the business schools, we developed what we refer to as postgraduate diplomas, which will then be a pathway or a pipeline towards getting into a master's program, in particular in MBA and in MBL. For us at the business school, we embarked on 2 postgraduate diploma programs. One was project management and the other one was supply chain management. And as part of that process, we did sort of a benchmarking sort of consultative exercise. And doing that, it was clear that from all the universities and higher education institutes that offered a postgraduate qualification in supply chain, none of them at all had a module in ethics, governance, and sustainability. None. A few had 1 or 2 modules that will speak to legal aspects of supply chain. Already, it actually ties in nice to some of the difficulties that we begin to see being experienced by our practitioners in terms of practice because of that lack of strong foundational base on ethics, governance, and sustainability. We have designed a postgraduate diploma at the business school that starts in 2023, where we've dedicated a full 24 credits, which is a year module, to specifically focus on ethics, sustainability, and governance. I am aware that also the other institutes who have come up with postgraduate diplomas in supply chain as an intervention, either focused on procurement in the case of Stellenbosch, or focus on transport and logistics in the case of UJ, or focused on end-to-end supply chain in the case of Mankosa. There is an attempt to make sure that ethics finds resonance, finds space in the program. But I could definitely say that in terms of what we had before, from a capacity development point of view, nothing had sufficient content to prepare our graduates from an ethics and governance perspective. I could continue and talk about the other stakeholder engagements if you allow me, because there was a lot of pressure also coming from different stakeholders. For us as a university, the initiator of the conversation to come up with a qualification that will address issues that have already been observed in the public space was National Treasury, which hosted a master learning curriculum workshop. And in there, they were very clear about the deficiencies that they see in the supply chain practitioners that are active in the public service space. At the top of some of the deficiencies was really issues around ethics, around awareness and understanding of sustainability, and around governance. But over and above that, there were concerns around commercial acumen. There were concerns around understanding of value chains and analyzing and being able to position their roles in terms of facilitating value chain performance. There were concerns around adaptness to technology and an appetite to adopt technology to create the necessary efficiencies. I personally also interacted with the State-Owned Enterprise Procurement Forum. At that time, it was headed by Tetem Mampane, who spoke earlier on. They were very, very critical that they see and desire that supply chain gets to be elevated to a C-suite, but they need a qualification that is going to capacitate practitioners to be able to function at that C-suite level. And one of the key issues that they asked the business school to actually ensure that it is contained in the program was a module that will speak towards ethics, that will speak towards governance, such that when they do have access to the C-suite, they can actually add value to the board engagements, not only speak about supply chain issues alone, but speak more broader around organizational issues. So there was a lot of influence and impact on the structure of the program from the State-Owned Procurement Forum perspective. Obviously, we had to acknowledge the presence of other players in the space, the professional bodies, and we had a long discussion and engagement with Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. I think from their side, they've mature programs that are globally recognized. All they're looking for was an element of localization of the content to address some of the emerging South African-oriented problems, especially around ESD, especially around integrating the localized legislative framework within the board of an ethics and governance type of module. So that sort of influenced what we put in the module. But to conclude, in terms of our previous qualifications, we ill-prepared our supply chain practitioners from an ethics and governance perspective. But moving forward, I do see a plethora of postgraduate programs that now have a significant component of ethics and governance as part of the program structure. And I am hopeful that that gap will be closed. I pause here, level over to you.
I mean, this is very interesting, especially that you're getting from the organization and really looking at the, institutions producing students that can fit into the organization, they can solve issues as well. It gets me wondering that when we develop curricula, as an example, how much of the industry specialists that has been practical and instrumental in the industry are contributing to such from the university's perspective? Do you think that probably there's a bit of that disconnect? I can hear that probably that is coming up. There's a bit of that disconnect because it may be that academia doesn't speak a lot with professionals. And what should we be doing in really addressing such? And I'm glad that you're indicating that from the SBL perspective, there are some new modules, new courses that are coming up that has got an element of ethics in them. And that should really also address some of the challenges that we have. But now let's talk about now curricular development and also utilizing external advisors, people that are instrumental and practical, being in the industry, understanding what the key issues are that are coming up from the organizations.
The framework for curriculum development that is followed by institutes does require that universities engage with stakeholders, especially if the academic program is going to speak to a professional space. It is very, very important then that practitioners in that space also find a space to be able to express their opinion and also to influence the discourse. I will expect that all other universities need to follow that kind of engagement. I'm not so sure whether the extent in which they do that, how detailed and how in-depth it is, but it is expected that they should always be a voice of the practitioner in influencing curriculum. With us as a business school, fortunately, we have a very vigilant curriculum design specialist who sort of oversees those activities, who literally insisted that this will not even pass the first line of approval if a practitioner voice is silent. So we were forced then to actually organize a workshop and invite practitioners to be present for that workshop. But not only them alone, we also invited other key stakeholders. In our case, SIPs had a representation, Treasury, as it embodiments and sort of governs the public service supply chain space, also was present. For the state-owned enterprises space, the state-owned enterprise procurement forum actually sent 2 representatives to actually influence and be part of the discussions. I am confident that what emerged in the over and above addressing discipline issues also did reflect on the realities and requirements from the practitioner space.
Yeah.
I will probably expect that the next layer of the conversation is that once the materials are fully developed, they will need to be shared with SAPICs and SIPs for their own assessment with the intention that they will then recognize the qualification and be able to recognize graduates and be able to put them at a particular level within their own competency framework. But as a general rule, I think me and you have had this conversation a lot of the times. We have to make sure that as universities, we provide access and pathways for practitioners to come in and interact with us, especially in a non-transactional way, just to make sure that the university programs remain in touch with the realities of the spaces that they try to serve. From a business school point of view, we try to do that through thought leadership series, where we invite industry practitioners to come and share their ideas and interact with MBA and postgraduate students. We do have thought leader series. We do have workshops. We do try and organize some kind of mentorship and coaching cycles. But with the advent of COVID, the frequency of that was affected. But I think the spirit is there that there should not be a business school that exists outside business, outside practitioners. These three need to be interlinked and intertwined and continue with that continuous engagement. Luckily, we've got an alumni board which is already made up of practitioners that also becomes a conduit to actually force us to re-engage in the event that there's a perception of not fully engaged with the practitioner space. I am hoping that other institutes also follow the same blueprint.
Okay, indeed. Mr. Ngube, what I would want to know, in the process of developing the curriculum, especially on the postgraduate level and executive education, what has your benchmarking exercises revealed with respect to ethics and governance modules in supply chain programs? Is there anything specific that's coming up? I know you do benchmarking with international universities as well as part of the work that you are doing when you develop a curricula to see what is done in other countries and leading universities as well, if they have specific qualification that speaks to that. Is there anything that has come up in terms of such modules that speaks to ethics and governance in the supply chain programs?
Thank you so much, Lebo. For this particular program that the business school is launching, we did benchmark with 10 institutes. Out of those 10 institutes, 7 of them were international and 3 were locals. When it came to ethics and governance and sustainability, none of the local institutes had a module in ethics. Out of the international institute, only 3 had modules that have an ethics or governance component. One module was titled Legal Aspects of Supply Chain Management. The other one was an Introduction to Ethics in Supply Chain. And then the last one was Strategic Supply Chain Management. When we looked at the content, we recognized that the content did have elements of ethics and governance. But by and large, at that time of the benchmarking exercise, very few had anything ethics oriented. You could get ethics conversations when we speak about the procurement process, about the conduct and making sure that due diligence is followed. But as a focused area, which requires the level of scrutiny that we're expecting, none of them, unfortunately, had that kind of a module.
Is it? Very interesting. And I really want to bring Sari on board. Sari, are you there? Because I know that, from the SIP's perspective, there's an assessment, ethics assessment that is happening out there. And I think from the representation perspective, it's looking at as an the SIPS as a professional body for procurement and supply. At this point in time, it should, as part of the process and whilst developing these programs, really close up the current eminent issues that speaks to ethics. So Sari, it's good to have, because I'm going to tap back to Mr. Ngube as well. Welcome. And I want to hear from the SIPS perspective. I mean, there's a lot of work that is happening out there. You do a lot of salary surveys, benchmarks, and you're doing a lot of ethics. And I think you have heard it already that ethics is a way of living. And especially in the procurement environment, whilst we are involved on an end-to-end supply chain management. And I think we have heard it enough from Mr. Ngube as well, saying that the qualifications that we have in the industry, honestly, they have not invested much on ethics training. It's only now there's a bit that is going to be happening from the UNISA, from the School of Business Leadership perspective, which is good because we want to see that happening. So I would want you to share with us, Sari, in terms of the work, the ethics assessments that you're doing. What is the outcome? What is coming out from the industry? Colleagues, I would really, before Sari respond to that, just introduce her. Sari is the head of SIPS, South Africa Professional Body for Procurement and Supply. And she's got her passion and really elevating the profile of our profession by driving proper standards and really the professional agenda in the industry. I think we've seen her, how she coordinates with different stakeholders, building relationships, ensuring that from the education perspective, the education providers and professionals improve way of professional recognition in the industry. And we have seen that SIPS is also part of the Interim Supply Chain Management Council, and they are contributing to the work that has been happening on professionalization of our profession as well. Very passionate about women empowerment and really empowering people in detail and an advocate. That's what I love about everyone that is here. They are advocate of supply chain management and they want to see an improvement. So Sari, welcome. If you can just share with us the work that you are doing from the SIPS perspective. Thank you. Please check your audio, Sari. No? Maybe disconnect the earphones. Disconnect it from the laptop.
Let's see, can you now?
Yes.
Okay, apologies for that error. Good day, colleagues, and thank you, Lebo, for this amazing dynamic initiative. And it's a privilege to see some familiar faces and names, and grateful to be part of the discussion. So to get to the point and to add on to what Prof. Ambe and Mr. Ngube has spoken about, yes, for me, if I like things to be practical, it has to make sense on, can we do it and is it implementable on a massive scale, public sector and profession as such? Now, from best practices, what is working well, and not just from the SIPS world, but I find in my previous life in private sector, it was a global company who had to pay at that time, 15 years ago, $300 million due to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that they were found guilty of. Someone taking a paper bag with some cash in it. It was also a cultural thing. It was in the Middle East, And the way you manage contracts, or you do business in that way, where for them it might have been acceptable practices, but not in the world where we are governed by ethical practices. So that was an expensive lesson, and they then enrolled and they enforced compulsory ethics training every year that every employee had to undergo. It was not an option. And to create an awareness of what is ethics, because cultures differ, perceptions differ, and people don't know what they don't know. So it was about educating you on what is deemed to be globally acceptable and required ethical practices. And that was very valuable. And any person who was not willing to complete that was basically dismissed. It was like, you cannot take the risk of having you in this organization. So in the SIPS world, for me, I found it also, I thought I knew what a thorough ethics test looked like until I did the SIPS one. And I think at least 2 hours, you mustn't be in a rush. And it's not easy, but the insights I learned, because remember now, ethics is not just about curbing corruption. It is about addressing cases of abuse, whether it's an exploitation, supply exploitation, whatever, human rights, bribery, fraud, modern slavery. So it links up with the Sustainable Development Goals. It's bigger than just corruption, and being aware of that and the immense responsibility we have as procurement and supply chain professionals. Because we evaluate these suppliers. Do we do on-site audits? If I'm sourcing anything from another country, do I know who's making that? And there are organizations that can go and do that and do on-site audits for you. So ignorance is not an excuse anymore. We're in the information era. And technology, absolutely. So the ethics test, I still learn every time because it's refreshed every year. And it's complementary to all current SIPS members. You can, and not just SIPS members, individuals. Obviously, it's personally, but organizations as well. To sign the mandate. And the sad thing is, it's a mission for us to get that done. The only company, organization we got so far to really sign a pledge of ethics was Rand Water. Because it means every person involved in procurement and supply chain in your company has to have completed that ethics test. So it's sad because it starts with leadership and driving this down. And obviously, maybe not with a stick, but incentivizing, recognition and celebration of the learnings and things like that. So I believe there's always ways to implement things. And then you've got a foundation of where everyone knows what is right and wrong and what is ethics. And you can build on from that. And to have it included in the curriculum is very important. I think it's how we are evolving and maturing as a discipline. But it can't stop there. It has to be an ongoing thing. And that's now the magic of having your higher education institutions, your occupational institutions, training institutions, along with your professional body. Because you do your qualifications, you study, you get your degrees and whatever else. But what then? How do you remain relevant? How do you become a professional? Because you might not be when you're fresh out of grad school. But that's where a professional body, and for those who I'd like just to, just this plain SACPA definition of what is a professional body, because every day I still get inquiries about a designation versus a qualification, and they're not the same thing. So a professional body is a body of expert practitioners in an occupation, procurement and supply chain, or profession, resulting in learning in and for the workplace. So this says, we link up with professionals and practitioners, whether you're out of university, you already have been in the field for 20 years. And it's ongoing learning. It's about continuous professional development. It's about driving ethical practices. Now, being a non-statutory body currently, we don't have the teeth to chase up on people. I can remove you from my membership list. I can bar you for life. But if the employers don't know the severity of that, what's the consequences for people? And we've seen it. SIPS members in more than one SOE that have landed up in the news for unethical conduct. and sitting with mud in your face was like, sure, that's embarrassing, but to pursue this, and you've got legal cases, you've got, it's a very messy field to go into. So from where we are at currently, we can strive this, we can educate, and connect with our stakeholders, but unless it's becoming formalized by act of parliament, we might be going around this mountain, more than once. So yes, brilliant work. We, for me, fundamentally would be if the Interim Supply Chain Management Council is formalized as a regulatory body, but in the sense of not one body can do it all. If you look at the Engineering Council as well, they're there, but under them there are specialities. So specialized professional bodies, for instance, that ensure that standards and competencies within that specialization field are always advanced and ensure you remain professional. So for me, it's never a competition. It's about all of us are collaborating on ensuring whatever framework and solution we bring for South Africa will work, because it's easy to have a million policies on paper. But I'm always just hearing like, if we've got all these policies, why are we having this conversation about the corruption? Why do we have Zondo Commission? So it breaks my heart. It's like there's so much effort gone into setting the policies right, but they're not working. So how can we get them to work? How do we need to change them to work? So yes, that's just in a nutshell of where we as professional bodies are with SAPICS as well, engaging with students, with industry. So we all, I would say collectively, an effort towards advancing it, and not just in South Africa. This is an Africa-wide actually drive, professionalization of procurement and supply chain and other professions. So yes, thank you very much for this, and happy to address any questions or comments on this. Thanks.
It's very interesting, Sari. I mean, you are indicating that there's only one organization that has signed off in terms of their commitment, Rainwater, and I remember quite well, because I saw it somewhere on the website, their commitment. It takes me back to what we were talking about, the culture, the mindset shift, the culture and the level of integrity that we want to instill in various organizations. I think it's one of the challenges that we are seeing already, that if we don't necessarily have that instilled culture of compliance, of governance coming from the leadership, then anyone else that is following, the truth is they will not able to do the right things in the organization. And I'm just thinking out loud around that. But I also have another question, Sari, on your side. I mean, SIPS has been a custodian of the supply chain profession and procurement and supply, let me put it that way. But I want to understand that in your experience, has there been, a complementary engagement between, SIPS as an organization and various academia? And when I'm saying various academia, I'm talking about various universities, institutions out there in addressing the issue of ethics and governance. And in both the academic programs and also the practice. And I like what you are saying that, we are all working together to achieve a similar thing, and we need that collaboration. But up to so far, has that been done? Are we making progress? Are the academic institutions fully participative to the view of driving ethics governance in the industry?
Thank you, Lebo. Very good question. My experience within this field has been, my observations have been, it depends on the institution. Take one step back, where SIPS is, they've got a global standard for procurement and supply chain. That's a competency framework that's based on global research and input. So that framework cannot be touched as such because it's linked to a regulatory framework with Ofqual and the qualifications they've developed. So when you connect with a higher education institution in South Africa about discussing accreditation of these qualifications, because with obviously the aim of when a graduate leaves, at least they have a clear pathway towards professionalization and achieving a designation. But what we found was there was a massive gap between what the competency framework has versus what the university curriculum has. And if it doesn't have some overlap of at least 60%, the regulatory council basically in UK cannot accredit that. It's just too much of too big a gap. And that's been a constant challenge. Now, the big, massive positive step for me was last year when the benchmarking exercise that Prof. Anbe spoke about globally evaluating and measuring up different frameworks within the supply chain management world. And then coming to one framework that we say, if this framework from a capacity building, if we use this as reference, we can develop our curriculums in line with what is recognized to be key skills and knowledge we need for in education. So it's, but I would say 90% of that is exactly the SIPS global framework. It's like, yay, we've got alignment, because that makes all of our jobs easier, because not one university has the same curriculum for procurement and supply chain management. They all are different depending on the focus, as was Jardine Ngubel mentioned, was I think UJ's logistics and Stellenbosch's procurement. So there isn't an alignment. So you come out here with a degree, you go into the workplace and you have no clue what to do actually, because you just got the theory bit. So if we can, get that competency framework and use that as a point of reference for all new curriculum developments, it will really help from a standardization. And from there, you can then continually improve it every 5 years and new, update it, refresh it. So currently, I know UNISA is busy with it. A couple institutions are more eager to renew, but it is a slow turning world. It takes a long time to develop a new qualification, submit it to SACPA for approval, and it's a process. Private universities, I find, are easier to adopt. I have engaged with 2 that reached out about it. And we're very grateful to have some guidance on what do we put in our curriculum. So once we get that agreement, then I think it will be a massive game changer, and taking a step back even into the schools. But that's, I think, let's get this right first. So yes, lots going on, and including the ethics, ethical practice. It's part of this competency framework that was presented to all the stakeholders last year. It's almost, there's always that thread going through everything we do, but you need to be educated on that as well. Okay. I hope that answers it.
It does. And I think for me, one other comment is around functioning at the C-suite level. I mean, I think we've had this discussion several times in our lifetime, and really around the reporting of this profession of ours as to where does it report, and how do we influence certain conversations and the directions of organizations as well. And do you think that it's one of the things that's still contributing to where we are as a country, and as a profession itself? Because we're driving professionalism, we're driving all these other great initiatives in the industry, but it seems like someone is not listening at all, or someone is just partially hearing what we are saying, and that was it, then it cuts, immediately. Is it, do you believe, well, I believe, I'll give you my view, colleagues, my view is that because we're still not functioning at a certain level, that we are faced with so many challenges. In fact, on LinkedIn, I ran a poll, when was it, 2 weeks ago, and just trying to understand where supply chain should be reporting to. And very interesting, coming out of the poll were responses from everyone. I mean, some of the people indicated that no, supply chain should be reporting to the CEO. Some people said, no, it must report to a COO. Some of the people said that, no, it must just report to marketing, but at a very lower percentage as well. But it's clear that this is really already bringing some of the dynamics that we're facing. And we're talking about, at the C-suite level, and how do we make a difference, and how do we contribute to where supply chain should be as well. I think for me, that's the one element that is very, very critical around that. So what is your view in that, in terms of the C-suite level and the reporting and us being able to make a difference where it matters?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Also passionate about having a seat at the table, at the right table. Historically, from linking up with the maturity of the profession, we were used to, when I was in private sector as well, initially you would report into finance. You know, they would just check your spend. You just have to justify your existence by savings. That was the level of operations. And this past few years, and I'm not, sure if COVID actually fast-tracked the realization of the importance of procurement and supply chain and responsibility and power they have to either, it can cause, driving sustainability of an organization, it can make or break an organization. And those who are out there, I would say, let's learn from them. We've got a few very senior I would say CPOs, SIPS members, that where they go, you can see the difference. We have a CPO that was, he was at Woolworths and that's Fashini, and you can see the things they are doing, developing local suppliers. And instead of importing, they are rather now, empowering those kind of things. So that awareness of your responsibility, that drills down. So, but I would say, depending on the industry where you're in, and because it's sometimes very cultural, where they think, that's just the buyer, let him just do his job and, sort out the purchase orders for us. And I always say we should stop asking for permission. Set up your business case. The finance guy will always think he knows everything. Apologies to finance, but that's why they're there. They're there to ensure that we know what the budget is. We know what our KPIs are to have on a financial side. But from a procurement and supply chain side, they won't know. So we have all these tools we can use, whether it's from our education, our workplace, there's lots of tools, for example, in SIP's website, and I'm sure SAPIC's as well, that you can say the procurement cycle, what are best practices, what do I do? And you know your business or your organization, and you can identify improvement initiatives, because it's obviously always about continuous improvement. How can we do things better, faster, at the right price or the right value, and drive the profitability of an organization or in public sector, at least ensure we get the best value for our taxpayers' contributions and as public servants. So use that and present a business case to whoever is next in line. And if he doesn't listen, you escalate it. You don't ask for permission. Just show them the difference, and we will earn respect by delivering on that. Because it's easy to talk, but if you show it, and it's usually have to quantify it back into numbers. CEO will say, how much is it going to cost me to invest, to save, or how much I'm going to save? And if you can quantify that, you already got a step in the door, and that will earn your place at the seat in places where they don't realize that yet. So otherwise, we're going to be, having also the same discussion for years on end, waiting for somebody to recognize us. So no, leaning.
We need to definitely take it further and ensure that we own up to the process and make sure that the reporting is at the right place. I mean, just to give you the statistics. So the poll that I ran, colleagues, I had 717 votes. And then out of the votes, people said that 33% said we should be reported to a CEO, 38% said COO, 24% said CFO, and then 5% said sales executives. So the poll is already closed, but that's an analysis and feedback that was coming from different people, different professionals, CEOs, CFOs as well, that had contributed to this poll. Can you see how interesting that is in terms of our thinking around where we're supposed to be making it? But interesting enough, what was coming out was the less amount of 24% sits with the CFO, but the highest percentage is with the CEO, which can be a very conflicting process as well, in that the COO normally they have the budgets, they are technical. So that's like being a referee and a player at the same time. So that's my thinking. We can look at different organizations, how they are structured, but it's exactly saying, how do you influence a proper process? Imagine when you're reporting in the operation structure, you have an engineer that gives you and wants to also influence your process as a procurement person. CFO, at least it's almost closer, but CEO, that's where we want to be at the strategic level, also make sure that we function at the C-suite level and be able to make some contribution. I want to bring back Dr. Professor Ambe and also Mr. Nube online, because colleagues, I want you to wrap up on your side and just send through some questions that you have. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to read some of the comments and some of the questions that are coming up. So Prof. Ambe, if you're there, if you can just join us, just comment. I know that you're not showing your face. However, just probably confirm that you are there.
No, I'm here. I'm here. Thank you very much. Indeed, I
Oh, Prof, your line.
To thank my peers have been done, and we need this kind of platform to be able to, I think, for echoing the fact that can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Sari, for echoing the fact that we need the council, and in fact, the council, a lot has been done, and we all need to put our hands together to support the good work that have been done. I just want to dwell on the aspect of the articulation of and how universities and how professionalization can support the involvement of all the stakeholders in the country. One of the key things which some of our peers are not aware of is the fact that all universities go through a thorough process of development of their qualifications that is given. Internally within university through the quality assurance mechanism processes in the universities, as well as through the Council of Higher Education. And the Council of Higher Education would have to give a go-ahead for every qualification that is being developed. Now, this is how the council, the interim council, would support professionalization in the country. All universities, once the Council of Higher Education develop what we call the competency framework for supply chain management, which would then define the standards in terms of curriculums. And the Council of Higher Education working with the Interim Supply Chain Council, it means that there would be an alignment of the technical standard and competency framework that has been developed already by the Council for Professional Practice. And once the CHE develops that, it means that that curriculum, the content, which is there, will reflect on what each university will have to roll out, will have to offer. Because before every university in the country, their qualification is being approved, it will be aligned to what the CHE has developed. That is why I'm saying that the council has done a marvelous job. It's still in process, and we need the support in that respect. Now, coming to the other comment in terms of from Sean that Stellenbosch, they have developed public procurement law. I think when I mentioned the fact that we at UNISA developed the first qualification, I mentioned the fact that we have over 5,000 practitioners in the country. Where are they being capacitated? UNISA, despite the limitations, is the first university in the country to have developed a degree program on public procurement in 2014.
We are losing you, Prof.
So there's a qualification focusing on public procurement. And we are working with different institutions, and that process was also development of the various stakeholders. Thank you, Lebo.
Thank you, Prof. Before you go away, I only have got one last question on your side. And my question speaks to the license to practice. So from the council perspective, I want to know, are we considering imposing a license to practice as we professionalize in our country? Are we considering that? imposing
Yes.
it, medical
Yes.
fraternities. Like,
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
There have been certain designations that have been proposed in the competency framework. So those license to practice in terms of the designations is clearly articulated in that technical standard and competency framework. So yes, it is considered.
It is considered. Well, my other comment, thank you, Prof, for that. And please, whilst I'm chatting to the other colleagues, just think of what your last comment and advice solution is that the practitioners can take away from this session. Sari, on your side, my question is, looking at the ethic test that is taken by organizations and individuals, if there are gaps that are being found and they need attention, how does SIPS facilitate enhanced learning for such professionals?
On skills gaps, actually, the SIPS global standard, that competency framework I mentioned, it is on an electronic format also on the website. And you can test your knowledge versus that, which actually is like an online skills gap assessment you can do as an individual when you remember. And for corporates, the SIPS for business side, they would have a cohort of candidates and they will conduct skills gap assessments with them specifically, and then offer or have a customized program to basically fill those gaps. So it's for individuals, so online. Happy to share the links if you want to explore, and that you can say, okay, I thought I know it all and this, but what about this? And then additionally to that, there's lots of additional resources to help you get a bit deeper knowledge and understanding of it. So last words to all my colleagues out there is you don't have to wait for new regulations or things to be formalized by whoever out there. You can just continue learning. It's a journey. Stay updated, read the news, think of the impact on where you are at currently, and always look out for, what's the impact on you, and ensure you, sit at the table and never stop learning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sari. Mr. Ngube, on your side, do you think we are better prepared to deal with pressures of unethical supply chain management practices?
From a capacity development point of view, I think the programs are appropriate. They'll be able to kickstart the process. Obviously, the debate is more broader. Is ethics influenced by value systems, by culture? And when we say culture, do we mean business culture or do we mean societal culture? So I think the conversation is actually more broader than what universities could provide. I think society itself also needs to play a role. That would be some of the advocacy that we'll be looking for from universities in general, to speak to society in general about ethics, about values. But from a professional point of view, I think the programs that we've brought into the market would be quite helpful for our practitioners. I just wanted probably to comment on the previous question about the access or the drive to get access to the C-suite and be value adding. I think as we champion our own cause as supply chain, we also need to be aware that once you are in the C-suite, it's really more about the organization. So it might be important to understand the responsibilities of the other functions and add value in their own discourse. And to do that, as a business school, we have recognized that those of you that have got MSIPs could then apply for access to MBA, MBL through a recognition process, and be able then to broaden their horizons to include general business practice or business management. So please, let us not only vertically grow within the supply chain, let us also remain relevant. I think the last part that I wanted to magnify that Ntatema Pane also spoke about earlier on is the fear of digitalization and technology by most of us in supply chain space. I think Sean did give a few examples where some of that fear manifests itself. The issue of us not being able to switch on our mics and be visible during serious engagements, whether be it a bid evaluation or a bid education process. We have to really adopt technology. We have to really embrace digitalization. For us in supply chain, it brings so many advantages. First and foremost is the transparency that we're looking for. It's the visibility that we're looking for. It's the ability to be agile in actually instituting appropriate responses for whatever challenges we have. But over and above that is the ability to be able to have a sound monitoring and control platform, which is very, very, very good for audit purposes, especially being the function that is, in my own opinion, widely assessed from an audit perspective. I think let us be upfront and let us adopt these tools and utilize them. Let us not be fearful of them. I pause here, Lebo, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ngube. Colleagues, with your permission, I would like to have all the panelists opening up their cameras so that we can see them for the last time. Then I can officially thank them, and then we will give Mr. Ngube to give us a vote of thanks in terms of this session. Where's everyone else? Let's see, Sean there, Kamogela, you there? So what I'm going to tell you, I've been looking at some of the comments, but one of the comments that came out of LinkedIn is that our efforts will be in vain because corruption is endorsed at the highest level. The further endorsement of corruption is that juniors will get reprimanded, but the seniors will be free. That's the current situation. So it's one of the things that is coming out from the industry. I'm not sure if people have lost faith and people just do not know, or they are frustrated in having these conversations. And I've been told a couple of times that you will talk as much as you can and try to push the whole process. But it's going to be a while. And us as a, as industry captains, my question to all of you, are we committed to ensure that professionalization happens in the industry? And really pushing toward justification of doing the right things, pushing governance as well, and making sure that this support system that is needed in the industry happens and be able to give feedback. And I think for everyone that is online, participants, just be aware that like Mr. Professor Underwood, he has indicated that there will be a roadshow that is coming up for all of you to be informed of the progress, what has been happening with the council. Obviously, we are running with the interim council, and all those issues that has been addressed by the Zondo report are already being addressed as part of the Zondo report. I mean, as part of the council and all the industry bodies that we have. Your last, anyone, it doesn't have to be by order if you want to comment. If there's no comment, Ms. Ngube, I will request that you close the session. I will want to really thank everyone that has attended the session. I've taken a lot of notes here in terms of the work that needs to happen with the board's oversight, in terms of their accountability, understanding their role, the procurement bill, look at political appointments and vis-a-vis the skills. I think there's one of the countries which I forgot that really makes sure that their ministers, if they are appointed, in fact, they are skilled in those roles. And I think that's really what came from Dr. Likubu as well. Procurement officers that must stop being sacrificial lambs, guys. And we're going to Easter now, we're going to eat a lot of lamb and fish and with the bride. Let us not be those sacrificial lambs. Let's make sure that we protect our profession. We need to know the triggers. We need to make sure that we start focusing on blacklisting of suppliers. We need proper structure, and this is the body that we are talking about, the council. And then we need to stop with this duplication of agencies in the industry. We need one anti-corruption agency that's going to have a look at all these cases that we have in the country. Know how to demonstrate good faith, because you will be questions. There's nothing like being silent. If they are putting you under pressure, gather some coaching to know what to say, how to do it as well. But it is very important to be vocal. I've seen it. Or else they will put you and shift you off your role. Or they'll find something wrong about you and you shall be suspended or dismissed, colleagues. You have a role around that. enhance communications in the organization, embrace technology as well. Let's move away from the manual work. But the most important part is that we have institutions, we have professional bodies that are here that are capacitating you with regards to the skills. We have coaching that we have and mentorship from AWISCA as well. Be part of the coaching circle, be informed as part of this process as well. So to all my colleagues that are here, if you do not have any other comment, please, 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 I can see everyone is saying this has been an enlightening and a great session, and we will make sure that colleagues that we are informed on we're going to have engaging sessions, as you know, that they have these sessions on monthly basis on procurement issues. So be part of them so that you have all the solutions. Mr. Lube, if you can close the session for us, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lebo. Let me take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you that attended. We are continuously speaking to each other, and it won't make sense for us to just continue speaking to each other. So it is really an honor for us to engage with yourselves. We appreciate the comments that have come through the chats. We appreciate the questions that you have posed for us. And I think to our panelists, we are so sorry that we had to put a little bit of pressure on ourselves, but we could see that time is moving and we are losing momentum and traction about the topic, especially since everyone is looking into the space on what's going to happen to the enablers of corruption. By the way, that's what we are called out there by people who say if you're in supply chain or procurement, you are actually enabling corruption. So we needed to be seen to be actually taking action, taking recognition of what has come out as a public indictment on ourselves. I would like to place very personal thanks to Dr. Benila Kubu, whom we only got yesterday night, to really availing yourself, dropping everything and being here. Your contribution, as you saw in the morning, has been greatly appreciated, and it has really also opened our own understanding and covered sort of our blind spots. We are going to be taking the conversation further with you, especially with the anti-corruption task force that you are referring to. I think to my partners, Ms. Sarehomen and Prof. Ambe, we've been working this journey for quite a while. And it is good to see that you are still committed and are still energetic. I still look forward to us engaging further in either extending this conversation or moving it into addressing some of the other identified elements that have emerged through here. I think for Scott, personally, I've been watching you from afar. So this is my first encounter to share stage with you, and what an illuminating experience that has been. We sincerely hope that this is not the first, it should be the first of many. I look forward to us engaging. I think to level AWISCA is a point for the organization and administering of this event today. This has been very, 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 very good and very efficient in how the technology has functioned. But over and above that, I think the commitment to the conversation and making sure that a result comes out of this engagement. I would also like to remind yourselves that please let us probably consider an opportunity to either provide a rapporteur report or coming out of today's engagement, if possible. That will then link directly to the conversations that we've been having around the petition that is still open, so that we provide further evidence and further information to help people recommit to that pledge and sign the petition. I am also looking forward to actually you yourself, Lebo, not only facilitating in this platform, but coming closer to us as universities and bringing the voice of the practitioners to be able to get some of these more focused engagements. I think what I like from AWISCA is really the mentorship and coaching cyclists, which I believe from us at universities level, we have neglected that part because we're purely transactional. We give you content, we assess you, and we pronounce whether you've passed or failed. We forget that there's a lifelong aspect to it. So it's some of the elements that I'll be looking forward in having further conversation with you and seeing how those can get to be infused as part of the support series that we provide to supply chain students. But the bigger message is to my own students that are in the platform, past and present. The past ones, please publish your work. Let not your work gather dust. I think we need to share it with the world. It was invaluable work. Me and Dr. Benele Kube and Prof. Ampe are here to facilitate the publication of that work. Please, this is an open invitation. Let's get it out there. Let it inform other practitioners. Those ones that are present in the system, let us not be fearful. Let us engage. Ms. Sari has provided some links on the chat site. Let us assess those links. Let us do those skills assessment gaps. And then when you come to me, you are focused on what you need complementary support on over and above the module requirements. I think with these few words, Level, I'm very thankful and honored to have been part of the panel. I will hand over to you then to bid everyone goodbye until our next session early next year. Over to you, Level.
Because yes, it's not going to be early next year. We are continuing with the conversations. You know us. Well, if there's one thing that I must applaud myself, it's 12:43. So just 3 minutes above, when we are supposed to be completing with the conversation. So we are right on time, colleagues. Because I know that we are scheduled 12:40 to 12:50 for vote of thanks. Again, colleagues, thank you to the panelists for your insight. I appreciate you. On monthly basis, everyday session with our coaching circles, be part of it, contribute, and please, we're going to get a recording of this session, by the way, and I see some of you have requested the presentation that I did. I will send it through as well, but you will get also additional 2 links, the one for the petition that Awiska had, and the second one for the survey that we are running for the 2nd year now on the perception of supply chain practitioners on corruption going forward. So I would really, really love to have your contribution onto that. And again, thank you so much, colleagues. Have yourself a pleasant afternoon, and keep yourself warm. We can see the weather is horrible outside. Thank you again, everyone. Bye. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.